remittances to reinforce their homes so that they're better able to withstand the cyclones that batter the archipelago. The government and NGOs even run a pre-departure course to teach migrant workers' families how to deal with the distance and to manage the money they receive. As it stands, it's a community divided. Some see the overseas worker programs supplying their families with means to better their circumstances. For others, the time people spend away is simply a drain on this small country's already limited resources.
Rebecca Root. And that's all for this edition of the programme. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope. And you can hear more stories, including tales from Taiwan's LGBT clubland, on the From Our Own Correspondent podcast. And we'll be back again next weekend with more of the real lives behind the news headlines here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC program From Our Own Correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great day.
Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fondal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm sitting in for Marcy Mercusa for the next couple of weeks, so thanks very much for waking up to the program here, and hello as well to the folks streaming us online. First, though, we're going to head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning, Heather.
I'm glad you remembered my name.
About that. Like, who are we saying hello to? Heather.
What day is this?
Heather. It's Monday, for sure. It's Monday. Good morning.
Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is going to become the second hospital in Canada to use AI to detect weapons. Shared Health says it's going to test out these new detectors at the entrance to the Health Sciences Emergency Department as well as the Crisis Response Centre. Analysts say this technology isn't sophisticated enough to detect all weapons, so we'll hear more about that. And bonding through basketball in River Osborne. Dozens of young players came out to yesterday's opening of the upgraded courts at the Mayfair Recreation Centre. We're going to take you there in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you very much,
You're
Heather
welcome.
Wells. I remembered this time.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. I am Faith Fondal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio, and Abby Adeyemi is our tech producer today. May McKillop, our show director. Brad Lilly is our streaming producer. Lots to come in the program. On the program, in our last half hour, finding a job can be hard. We heard from a teen who, despite their best efforts, can't seem to land a job. We'll hear from a Winnipegger in their mid-20s who says despite the opportunities being out there, it feels like no one wants to take on 20-somethings. That's coming up in our 8 o'clock half hour of the program. In this first half hour, though, he has been dubbed Winnipeg's Elvis. And this weekend, friends, family, and the community came together to hear why folks couldn't help falling in love with Ray St Germain. That's coming up here in our first half hour of the program. If you're trying to figure out what to wear today, well, it's going to be a warm day today, a temperature high of 27 degrees. It'll feel like 30 with the humidex. Sun and cloud, though, for most of today with a slight chance of showers in the afternoon with a risk of a thunderstorm because it's going to be hot. Expect also hazy conditions, so be prepared for those conditions here in Winnipeg. We'll give you a full look at your forecast for Winnipeg and the rest of the listening region coming up here on the program after World Report. Stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Katie Crutchfield goes by the name Waxahachie, and over the past few years, she's gone from playing basement DIY punk venues to some of the biggest stages on earth. She'll be here to tell you about her music and why she recommends not having any social media accounts.
Been yours for so long.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. This past year has been a hot one. The European Union's climate agency has released its latest data. It shows that June was the 12th month in a row to hit temperatures above the pre-industrial era average. And as Anayat Singh reports, it does not bode well for the long-term warming trend.
You're not wrong if it's felt much hotter than usual over the past year. Each of those 12 months have been at least 1.5 degrees warmer than they used to be in pre-industrial times, an unprecedented stretch of hot weather that's played out in climate disasters like floods, fires, and heat waves all over the world. Rob Jackson at Stanford University says it's a warning.
It is an opportunity for a wake-up call, and frankly, nature is telling us what the consequences will be.
1.5 degrees is the temperature threshold that world leaders agreed not to breach in the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. While a single year rising above 1.5 degrees does not mean the Paris limit has been reached, Jackson says it gives a teaser for the climate extremes we might see.
We've sprinted right to the edge of that threshold quickly and quite cavalierly.
The global El Niño weather pattern has played a role in driving up temperatures, which are expected to normalize a bit since it ended last month. But the impact of climate change is clear, according to Bill Merrifield, a research scientist at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
It is an indication that we are getting close to that threshold. It won't be this year or next year, but sometime in the next decade or two.
All further signs, the experts say, to speed up climate action. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
People in many parts of Canada are experiencing that heat today. On the Atlantic coast, temperatures will feel like 40 degrees Celsius for some. And a record-breaking heat wave continues to cover parts of BC, Saskatchewan, and the Northwest Territories. Forecasters expect the soaring temperatures to continue this week. Yvette Brand has the latest.
Jeffrey Abubakri is beating the heat with a spritz of water at this downtown Vancouver park.
Just wearing shorts, t-shirts. The misting stations are great.
Extreme heat has arrived in Canada's west, triggering warnings throughout BC and Alberta. Jeremiah Kachikisik Ojibwe for Big Sky is staying in the shade.
This heat is going to hurt a lot of people.
Sarah Chu of the Union Gospel Mission is letting downtown dwellers know about cooling centers and air-conditioned options.
We're just doing everything we can to make sure people know where to go to stay cool.
Rob Griffith, a lead meteorologist with Environment Canada, warns it's getting hotter from a weather system that's spiking temperatures and breaking records on the U.S. Pacific coast.
An area of high pressure in the upper atmosphere that's covering most of Western North America, and that's building into Western Canada at this point.
Calgary could see highs this week up to 35 degrees at the Stampede, but Carrie Blizzard, the public safety director, says they're ready.
Go on site, additional water refill stations and misting stations, and just providing those spaces where people can cool off.
In the U.S., tens of millions of Americans face an excessive heat warning as a heat dome over California breaks records and ups fire risks. By midweek, temperatures are expected to ease, at least in BC, bringing relief from this summer heat wave. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
Beryl has made landfall in Texas at a Category 1 hurricane.
It will be a deadly storm for people who are directly in that path.
Acting Governor Dan Patrick warning Texans of Beryl's power. The storm strengthened back into a hurricane shortly after midnight. It is packing winds of nearly 130 kilometers per hour after making landfall in Matagorda. People across Texas have been warned to be ready for the worst.
Rain is going to be everywhere, and flooding could be everywhere, and a storm surge from Corpus to Galveston Island.
More than 390,000 customers are without power in Texas. In Houston, the mayor is telling people to stay off the roads. A hurricane warning is in effect for much of the Texas coastline, and a number of counties have issued evacuation orders. Beryl is blamed for at least 11 deaths in the Caribbean last week. At least 20 people in Ukraine are dead. Dozens more are injured after a wave of Russian missiles hit cities across the country. In Kyiv, a crowd of people rushing to a children's hospital that was hit by a rocket. They're trying to clear away debris at the site. Residential buildings and electricity substations in the capital were also hit. The huge missile attack also hit cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 40 rockets were fired. Ukraine's defense minister is calling on allies to provide more air defenses. France is entering a new political era. An era where no one party has a majority. Yesterday, voters showed they do not want the far-right National Rally Party to form government. A left-wing alliance called the New Popular Front won the most seats, but not enough for a majority. As Tom Perry reports, that leaves centrist Emmanuel Macron staying on as president, but leading a second-place party and looking for a new prime minister.
Supporters of the New Popular Front, the hastily formed coalition of left and far-left parties, were celebrating last night, coming out on top in the second round of national voting, halting the far-right National Rally Party that had hoped to win a majority in France's National Assembly.
Ce soir, le Rassemblement national est loin d'avoir la majorité absolue.
Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the firebrand leader of the New Popular Front, told supporters they denied the national rally the majority so many pundits had predicted, and called that an immense relief. At the headquarters of the national rally, it was a much different mood.
Malheureusement, l'alliance du déshonneur.
Jordan Bardella of the National Rally told supporters they were the victims of an alliance of dishonor between the far left and the centrist bloc of French President Emmanuel Macron. In the lead up to this vote, centrist and leftist parties had strategically pulled candidates in some constituencies and urged their supporters to vote tactically to stop the far right. That strategy paid off, but has also left France with a hung parliament and, for the moment, an uncertain political future. Tom Parry, CBC News, London.
Voters also went to the polls in the French Pacific territory of New Caledonia. And for the first time in decades, they elected a pro-independence Indigenous Kanak candidate to France's parliament. In May, New Caledonia saw weeks of deadly riots. People were protesting a change to the constitution that would alter voting rules. Indigenous Kanaks make up about 40% of the territory. They feared the change would dilute their influence. Questions continue about Joe Biden's future as a U.S. presidential candidate. This weekend, Democrats met to discuss Biden's next move following his poor debate performance. There are growing calls for the president to consider his run against Donald Trump, to reconsider that run. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, this is a big week for Biden as all eyes will be on him. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it sure is. This could very well be a defining week for his presidency. Congress is now back in session for the first time since that consequential debate, and elected Democrats will discuss in person whether they want to keep or drop him from the top of the ticket. Now, so far, at least 5 elected Democrats, most from vulnerable swing districts, have publicly called on him to step aside after his disastrous debate performance that raised questions about his mental fitness and vitality for the job. Now, over the weekend, top Democrats had a conference call where more lawmakers calling for Biden to leave was more than the number who spoke up for him to stay, according to multiple reports. But Biden is digging in, insisting he's staying in the race, telling ABC News he'll give it his all to defeat Donald Trump in November. But take a listen to California Congressman Adam Schiff on the state of his party's leadership.
This is not just about whether he gave it the best college try, but rather whether he made the right decision to run or to pass the torch.
Now, Democrats pushing for Biden's ouster are calling for Vice President Kamala Harris to take the helm, but Biden's campaign says this revolt is being orchestrated by Washington elites and isn't resonating among the party's base.
Now, Biden is hosting allies at a critical moment in his presidency and candidacy. What are we expecting during this week's NATO summit?
Yeah, well, Biden is hosting the world stage on his home turf, and his agenda shows he's going to be meeting with NATO members and hosting an unscripted press conference towards the end of the week. So he'll be under tremendous scrutiny for any stumble, any flub that could fuel more pressure from within for him to step aside.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
That is the CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. The most read story at cbcnews.ca is about tipping. 77% of Canadians polled don't like it. That story on our main page. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. I'm sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And we are going to continue that conversation about tipping or not tipping. It's the question we have been asking here on Information Radio. We'll hear from an expert what they have to say about tipping culture. That's coming up in our 7 o'clock hour of the program. In this hour, though, with 4 months until Election Day in the U.S., can President Joe Biden reassure American voters that he is up to the job for another term? We'll hear more about Biden's political future. First, though, he's been dubbed Winnipeg's Elvis, and this weekend, friends, family, and the community came together to hear why folks couldn't help falling in love with Ray St Germain. Stay tuned for that conversation coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And good morning to the folks watching on the television as well, CBC Television, and the folks streaming online. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Magandang umaga. Good morning as well to Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Hello.
Good morning. Well, tension at a Winnipeg private school over the Israel-Hamas war is not surprising to a professor of peace and conflict studies. A group of parents at St. John's Ravenscourt has raised concerns about bullying and about the way the school responded to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. The group says a letter sent by the school to families was one-sided. University of Manitoba professor Adam Muller says it reflects the stress and strain in the broader community. Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is soon going to be able to detect weapons using AI. Shared Health says it will test out the new detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and the crisis response center. Analysts, though, say this technology is not sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. At 12 minutes after 6 o'clock, if you see any issues, call our show director, May McKillop, 2047-883-093, 2047-883-093. So far, no major closures or delays that we know of so far, so let us know if you do see things. Abby Ediemi is our tech producer. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith. It's only past 6 o'clock in the morning, and guess what? The humidity tracker is at 100% already.
It's sticky.
So it's going to be sticky. It's just 6 a.m. and we are already at 100%. It will be humid today, and watch out for the mosquitoes. I have to say that. The mosquitoes.
All right. It's a good reminder. It's a good reminder.
17 degrees in the city. Clear skies. We'll see some sunny appearance very soon. Then we'll get a mix of sun and clouds today. A slim chance of showers and the risk of thunderstorm to go that late in the afternoon. It will be hazy. Yes, so you need to get prepared for that. And we'll be getting to a high of 27. It's even going to feel hotter than that due to the humidity mentioned. And tonight we'll see partly cloudy conditions. A good chance of showers sometime in the evening. Still, that risk of thunderstorm will stay with us, and then it's going to remain hazy into the evening period and will cool off to 15 degrees later tonight. And a sneak peek into tomorrow will start sunny, then it's going to become a mix of sun and clouds. The hazy condition continues, and tomorrow will climb to 29, so it's even going to be a hotter day tomorrow. But focusing on today, 17 right now in Winnipeg, we should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds, and then we'll get to a high of 27. Across board, we're looking at 15s already from Brandon all the way down to Morris, and even that's what the condition also looks like in the northern parts of the province. Right now, we are 17 in Winnipeg.
Fourteen and a half minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And we're going to stay here in Winnipeg. That is what it sounded like at Cavalry Temple. People remembering, singing, and celebrating Métis country music legend Ray St Germain. The 83-year-old man died nearly a week and a half ago after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. Now, several people spoke, sharing stories of his legacy, including his wife, Glory St Germain.
And because she's my friend, I posted, "Dear Lorraine, you may have won the Miss Manitoba pageant, but I won the love of my life, Ray St Germain, and it was just a beautiful life together."
It's great to see so many dignitaries here today to honor this great man. But I'm sure Ray, our dear friend Ray, is very, very proud because he was more than an entertainer to me. You know, I think back growing up in Duck Bay, struggles we faced. I didn't know racism even existed until I left Duck Bay. We're a poor community, like financially poor. We're family rich in our closeness as you are, the Germains, and very supportive of each other. And here was Ray already fighting for it in 1973, my proud Métis. And it is actually probably very, very brave at that time to take on the challenge of singing something that wasn't well received in this country. Very hard to imagine because I was only 13 years old. And little did I ever know that I'd be out there fighting for rights for my people. Ray already was paving the way for me, cutting the trees so I can see the other side. And I was 37 years old when I met Ray. And Ray always told his story to me. And at that time, I was working for the Department of Justice, and I was really into fighting for different things and for my people. And I was going to run for president in 1997. And the late Mr. Flamand, he was going to run. And he wanted to get Ray's support because Ray was a singer. Ray knew a lot of people. And he said to Ray, why don't you come with me? I'm speaking in a debate tonight in Selkirk. And so he said, no, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to be involved. I'm a musician. That's what I love to do. He was able to drag Ray to Selkirk to the debate. And I was just young and full of vinegar at the time. And I started to speak during our debate. I made this passionate speech. And Ray always tells me this story, this part. I'm sorry, Mr. Flamand. But Ray says, I looked at my man that took me there. I said, Mr. Flamand, good luck. so after that, Ray became a very good friend of mine. And I won the election. And from that day on, we became friends. But it hit me when I walked in here. My friend is gone. I don't see that face anymore, that smile. That thing that gives me such warmth inside my heart. Because it's automatic. Every time I saw Ray, it made me feel good. It made me feel good when I saw Ray. Then I remember this. So, Ray, I know you're going to live on. There's not a doubt in my mind you're going to live on in our hearts, in our minds, in our ears. I'm going to hear you. And your music will live on with your Métis government forever. So, again, glory to the family. On behalf of all Métis, on behalf of my cabinet, we thank you for letting us have him all these years.
I grew up a dream of being a cowboy, loving the cowboy ways.
David Chartrand, president of the Manitoba Métis Federation. He was one of many people celebrating Ray at a memorial this weekend. They were at Cavalry Temple in Winnipeg.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
19 minutes after 6 o'clock here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. If you see any issues on your commute this Monday morning, call our commuter line, 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. May McKillop is waiting for your call. I'm Faith Fundal here in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Nearly 40% of new immigrants are considering moving to another province or even leaving Canada altogether. It is according to a recent Angus Reid Institute poll. The main reasons? Rising rents and overall living costs. Might not be surprising for Alfred Lamb, the board chair of the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. They're also the executive director of the Centre for Immigrant and Community Services. Good morning, Alfred. Alfred,
Hello?
Are you there?
Yes.
Good morning, Alfred. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Hello.
When you look at this particular Angus Reid Institute poll, what stands out for you?
I think when you look at the findings, one thing that we see is that they're not surprising, right? They ring all the familiar alarm bells. The struggle for newcomers, pessimism among younger families, Canada losing ground in terms of our reputation as being a welcoming country and a role model for other nations and so on. And I think whenever you see a statistic that shows newcomers or immigrants or racialized populations being overrepresented in an area of struggle, the first question one needs to ask is whether there are systemic discrimination or racism involved in that situation.
Do you have an answer to that question?
And I think in the case of housing, there are real ongoing concerns of racial discrimination, right, by landlords. In the work that we do, we see most affected people such as racialized single mothers, visibly Muslim renters, different forms of name discrimination, and so on. And they may be expressed by refusing a potential tenant or making unfair demands such as asking for 6 months or even a year's rent in advance. So these are some of the issues that we're seeing on a continuing basis.
Of all of those things, I mean, they all sound very serious. What do you think needs to be addressed first? Or is this a problem that's so big that taking or addressing one of those things, it won't be enough?
Sure. And I think when it comes to the housing crisis, oftentimes we focus our attention on home ownership, right? But according to the latest census, almost 60% of recent immigrants rent. And so we need to address these issues of affordability and discrimination in the rental markets. And so among some of the things that we can tackle immediately are policy issues such as strengthening rent control and to ensure that potential tenants, they are not being squeezed out of the market by landlords charging rents that is exorbitant. In Ontario, we have a landlord and tenant board, but the backlog is so serious that it takes more than a year just to wait to hear a case from tenants about lack of repairs or maintenance. So these are some of the immediate actions that we can take to help newcomers to a better experience.
What's your sense of whether folks are using those processes to be able to have an adjudication? Is that something that folks are actually using?
As part of our work, we educate people on the availability of those resources that they can turn to. But the reality of life for many new immigrants is that they have so many other concurrent struggles that they're dealing with, and to engage in a process like this is oftentimes beyond what their time can afford, and so in many cases they simply choose to walk away, right, and try to look for another situation as far as a rental.
And so not surprising that 40% of new immigrants are considering moving to a different province or even leaving Canada altogether. What's at stake here? What if that intention is something that folks follow through with? What is at stake here?
I think at stake here is our future as a nation, right? Practically the entirety of our net population growth is due to, it comes from immigration, right? When you want to attract immigrants that are highly trained with professional backgrounds to come to Canada, and when they land, they face issues of housing. They face issues of having their experiences and qualifications recognized, struggling with basic things like healthcare, which is supposedly a shining feature of Canadian life. And it just goes towards challenging the question of whether Canada is a really good place to live. And for immigrants, Canada is a good option, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking that we are the only option. And so when there are these systemic and structural issues that they face upon landing, many of them just simply choose to look elsewhere, and which is what we're seeing reflected in the poll.
Alfred, thank you for making time to have this conversation, and do take good care.
Thank you.
Alfred Lam is board chair of the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, also the executive director of the Centre for Immigrant and Community Services. That was Homeshake with Nothing to See. You can find that on Homeshake's new album. It's called Horsey.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Coming up to 29 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Hello as well to the folks watching on the television and folks streaming on YouTube. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. May McKillop, our show director. Abby Adiemi is our tech producer. Lots to come here on the program. We're going to hear more about U.S. President Joe Biden. You'll recall that he sat down for a high-stakes interview this weekend with George Stephanopoulos from ABC News. Was Biden's performance enough to quell concerns about his re-election efforts after his poor debate performance last month? We'll hear more about that story still to come. Also coming up later on the program, when you tip, who gets the money? And does it make a difference if you tip in cash or credit card? Those are some of the questions that we're going to try to answer here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned for that coming up in our 7 o'clock hour of the program. We're also going to hear from Phil Dumont in our next half hour to talk more about Boeing pleading guilty to some charges stemming from plane crashes 6 years ago. Stay tuned for more on that coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's 17 degrees. Feels a little bit humid out there. Humidity now 100%. Mix of sun and clouds today and hazy. A high today of 27 with, again, a chance of showers and maybe a thunderstorm. A group of parents in St. John's Ravenscourt worries about the school's response to the Israel-Hamas war. They described instances of bullying against students who went to the private school wearing a keffiyeh. The checkered black and white scarf has long been worn by Palestinians and is often seen at pro-Palestinian protests. The parents, whose identities we are keeping confidential, say the school allowed students to wear keffiyehs. A University of Manitoba professor of peace and conflict studies says that is a sign the school is demonstrating respect. But Adam Muller says discussing the significance of the scarf could also be helpful.
Notwithstanding the fact that these symbols are loaded, particularly now, schools can still use that loading to sort of further the discussion of what it means to be tolerant, right? And how we need to be pluralistic in our acceptance of the differences that genuinely divide us without fracturing the community.
St. John's Ravenscourt won't comment on specific concerns. The school says it strives to be a welcoming place for students of all backgrounds. The chief operating officer at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is optimistic about new technology coming to the hospital. New scanners will soon be able to detect weapons using artificial intelligence. They'll be at the entrance to the emergency department and the crisis response center. And Dr. Sean Young is on board with this pilot project.
You're not going to capture everything, but it is a learning technology. So it has machine-based learning, AI technology built in, so that when something in another area, could be another country, another state, another province, experiences a similar challenge, there's learning from that.
Analysts say this technology is not sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. But Young says it's one of many measures the hospital's taking to improve security. HSC would become the second hospital in Canada to use this technology. In Paris, anti-far-right protesters clashing with riot police after first projections for the French election were announced. Projections putting a coalition of leftist groups in first place ahead of the national rally. The far-right group was predicted to win a majority but ended up in third. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance came in second. None of the parties won an outright majority, leaving parliament divided and the country in political turmoil. Ukrainian officials say Kyiv was bombarded overnight by a series of Russian missile strikes. It is the biggest bombardment in the Ukrainian capital in months. Among the buildings hit was a children's hospital. One early estimate suggests as many as 10 people were killed, along with substantial damage to infrastructure through eastern Ukraine. Well, after spending the weekend gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Beryl has made land in Texas.
Rain is going to be everywhere, and flooding could be everywhere, and a storm surge from Corpus to Galveston Island.
Acting Texas Governor Dan Patrick, Beryl is delivering wind gusts of more than 120 kilometers an hour, along with torrential rain. Hundreds of thousands of people are without power across the Texas Gulf Coast. Climate scientists say this year is on track to be the hottest on record, with this past month being the hottest June ever, the 13th consecutive monthly heat record. With temperatures above the Paris Accord target of 1.5 degrees warmer than pre-industrial times, Julian Nicholas is the EU's Copernicus Climate Agency.
The 12-month average as a whole, it's only a temporary crossing of this mark. It doesn't mean that we have reached that limit set by the Paris Agreement, but it clearly shows that we are getting closer to this limit as the climate continues to warm. So yeah, it's a stark warning that, again, the climate it is warming rapidly.
Copernicus adds June was the 15th month in a row for record ocean temperatures. Well, celebrating some new courts in River Osborne.
Keep your head up. Keep pounding.
Brett DeMonte Loban was among dozens of young hoopers at the stylish new Mayfair Recreation Center courts yesterday.
It's been awesome. A few of my friends are here. Some of the Seabears players are here. Just great people.
There were games, competition, and a skills camp for the young players. The project was an undertaking between nonprofit Basketball and Borders and the Winnipeg Seabears. One court was refurbished, another is brand new. You can find more on Manitoba News by heading to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
It's such a pretty court.
Is it? I haven't seen.
The colors. It's like there's yellow, there's blues, there's different hues of blues. Like it's
perfect.
It's so nice. Drove by there yesterday and thought, what's going on here? It looks like a big
Did you
party.
stop and play ball?
Sports and I have a complex relationship. So no, I drove by and thought everyone's having fun. I don't want to ruin the fun.
Aw.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Hello as well to the folks watching on the television and streaming online on YouTube. I'm in for Marcy Mercusa for the next couple of weeks. If you see any traffic issues this morning, call our commuter line, 204-788-3093. May McKillop is on the line there waiting for your call. No major closures, new ones at least, to tell you about. Of course, Vaughan is closed between Graham and the Promenade through to July the 10th for the next couple of days here. Kennedy as well closed at Portage until the 10th. So if you see things, call us 204-788-3093. Abby Adiemi is our tech producer and has more on the soon-to-be sticky weather.
Yeah, soon-to-be sticky. You say 17 in the city at the moment. We have this high humidity. I'll just tell you, just look out for that, okay? Expect a mix of sun and clouds today, a chance of afternoon showers and probably some thunderstorm to go with that. Hazy conditions will prevail. We'll definitely touch a high of 27, but it will feel hotter than that due to the humidity. So prepare for that. And then maybe later in the night, if we get those showers come through, we're going to cool off to about 15 degrees. Heading west to Brandon, 12 at the moment, partly cloudy. Today, expect a mix of sun and clouds with showers likely later, possibly thunderstorms to come with that. Hazy also with highs around 27. It's also going to be feeling humid because it's going to be feeling like a 32 for folks in Brandon. Thompson is currently sitting at 12 degrees, mostly cloudy at the moment. We'll see a mix of sunny skies today with haze to go with that, and it will get to a high of 28. 28. Further north in Churchill, also 12 degrees at the moment, mostly cloudy. Expect this mainly cloudy conditions to stick with you. Most likely some showers in the afternoon, and we'll be seeing highs of 18. Breezy conditions are expected to come with that also. Down in Dauphin, currently 15 degrees and sunny at the moment. These sunny conditions would transition to some clouds rolling in later, and we'll see a chance of afternoon showers and a thunderstorm. Some fog you noticed this morning for folks in that part of the region. They are dissipating, and we'll be seeing highs near 26. Gimli is currently sitting at 15 degrees and already seeing some sunshine. For the Interlake region today, expect a mix of sun and clouds, a chance of showers and thunderstorm, hazy with highs around 27. Steinbach at 13 and clear. Maurice currently 12 degrees and clear also. Today's forecast for the Pimna Valley region, we should be seeing a mix of sun and clouds, a chance of showers and thunderstorm. It is going to be hazy, highs of around 27, also going to be hotter than that, and then it's going to be partly cloudy later in the day with showers possible. Winnipeg currently at 17 degrees, and we're warming up to 27, but it's going to be feeling hotter than that.
It's going to be a hot day for many folks. For
Soggy.
Sure. Yep, it's going to
mosquitoes.
Be yep.
Okay.
They're all going to be around. All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi is our tech producer. We'll hear more from him on the program here. Stay tuned. Phil DeMott is at the CBC National Business Desk. Hello, Phil.
Hi, Faith.
And Boeing in the hot seat, pleading guilty, the aerospace giant, to charges stemming from those plane crashes 6 years ago. What exactly is Boeing admitting to?
Fraud, specifically that the company deceived U.S. regulators about a flight control system that was later implicated in 2 crashes of its 737 MAX. This was the one in 2018 and one in 2019. Under the terms, Boeing will pay a fine, about $250 million, have a compliance monitor for a 3-year period. Think of it like an independent agency to look, make sure they're doing the right things, and then spend about another $450 million on safety enhancements. This also becomes a problem for Boeing in terms of getting government business, because now it's branded as a felon, and that gives us some problems getting money out of the government in terms of selling planes to it, and that's 1/3 of the company's revenue. Back in 2021, the U.S. Justice Department and Boeing reached a deal around those 2 crashes, $2.5 billion in fines and compensation for the victims' families. Then this January, 2 days before that settlement was set to lapse, a panel blew off an Alaskan Airlines Boeing jet. Subsequent investigation led to a series of damning emails from company officials. That in turn led to this new series of allegations. All these problems resulted in Boeing's revenue dropping 25% between 2019 and 2020. The sales are only now getting back to the 2019 levels. And aircraft deliveries in 2018, Boeing delivered about 800 aircrafts to customers. It's fiscal 2023, it was only 525. Deal has to be approved by a federal court, but the lawyers for the families of the people who died in those 2 crashes want the judge to deny the settlement, calling it a quote-unquote sweetheart deal.
We had the WestJet work stoppage last week. Now there's a potential labor unrest at BC ports. What's happening here?
Yeah, I pick on this because of the unexpected outcome of that WestJet situation. On Sunday, the Canada Industrial Relations Board said the union representing BC longshoremen acted illegally when it issued a strike notice on Friday. The Longshoremen's Union gave notice against DP World Canada. That's the company that runs the container terminal in Vancouver. Fights over plans to introduce some automation into the port. Union said it wasn't consulted. Faith, it sounds like a bit of inside baseball, except the Employers Association representing the companies at the port said if the union struck DP, it would lock out all the workers. So they would shut down cargo traffic in and out of Vancouver. It wouldn't affect grain or tourist boats, but everything else. And that's a substantial issue because 1/3 of Canada's non-U.S. trade goes through Vancouver. Think of all that stuff coming from China. The reason to note this problem is that last month, WestJet and its mechanics, they thought they were heading to binding arbitration. Then instead, you got this 2-day strike that stranded thousands of travelers on the holiday-long weekend. In this case, the board found that only a minority of union members voted on this strike vote. It's unclear whether the union can just turn around and hold another vote or if there's some other sanction. And that's why I'm picking on it, because I'm not sure this situation is quite finished yet.
Could be more to come. And folks will remember what happened the last time there was labor unrest, labor dispute over contracts as well. So we're going to talk about wedding season because summer is, of course, the prime time. What are you finding about how much the average wedding costs these days?
I didn't know this, but it makes sense that 1/4 of Canada's weddings take place in August. So if you're taking the vows next month, you're going to face some furious coin. Try $19,000 US or $26,000 Canadian.
No kidding.
I know, that's according to the Knot, which is a wedding planning site, but it's actually cheap compared to other countries. France, the UK, Spain all clocked in at $23,000 US, but the average Spanish ceremony has 30% more guests than Canada's, so I guess they just have more friends. In the US, the number came out to be $33,000 US, according to Zola, another online wedding site, up 10% from 2022. The venue's the biggest expense, generally $12,000, and the engagement ring. But for some couples, Faith, cost may be less of a factor. Anand Ambani, he's the son of the 11th richest person on the planet, richest person in India. He's getting married this week. In March, they had a 3-day pre-wedding party for the couple. Yes, 1,200 guests. I wasn't invited, but other people were. A light show including 5,500 drones over a glass palace, especially built for the party. And oh yeah, Rihanna performed.
I too was not invited, just to let you know. The markets, how are the Monday numbers so far?
Right now, that surprise win by the left-wing coalition in France has that market up. The UK has a new government. That market's up, and Germany's up as well. It was negative in China. Hong Kong off almost 2%. Shanghai down 1%. Oil off 73 cents, $82.43 a barrel. Gold's down $17, $2,381 an ounce. And the Canadian dollar, it's down slightly, trading at 73.31 cents US.
Always good to chat with you. Happy Monday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Faith.
It's Phil DeMott at the CBC National Business Desk. 15 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And coming up in our next half hour of the program, to tip or not to tip? It is the question we've been asking here in the program. We're going to hear what an expert has to say about tipping culture here on the program. First, though, U.S. President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are both facing calls to step aside. So this past weekend, CBC's Cross Country Checkup asked callers, when did you decide it was time to step down from a job or something important to you? Here's what some callers shared with host Ian Hanamansing.
I was working as a consulting engineer with a company 20-some years. I kept being promoted until I became one of the most senior people. And I didn't really particularly want to do that because deep inside, I really wanted to continue designing things. But I took the job and I set myself goals. And when I felt that I have achieved them, I decided to leave. And that was traumatic to a lot of people around me because they thought that I am in such a senior position. I, since then, for 30 years now, have had an amazing career doing exactly what I want to do instead of what I felt that I had completed.
We built a boat. It took 30 years. We built a steel sailboat, and we left Ontario. We planned to go cruising for 10 years and maybe find a new place. And we did 3 years, and it was amazing. It was incredible and wonderful, and we learned so much. 3 years were equal to about 100 and how much we learned. But after 3 years, so many things had changed. And we found out that we were very social and community-oriented, and boaters are great, but you always say goodbye. You meet people, and then 3 days later, they're gone. So we said, well, this is great, but we should go home and find our place now.
It was time, I guess, in my mind, after close to 30 years, that I was at the peak of my career. I'm looking around and I'm seeing lagging energy, less enthusiasm, just not the same kind of oomph that they had when they first started. And I felt, due to watching those people and some personal circumstances, that it was time for me to exit when I felt that I was at the top of my game rather than waiting for the kick in the pants to say, okay, is it time for you to leave yet? I've actually had 16 different jobs in the last 16 years and have tried different things, and I've really enjoyed every one of them. And when it was time for me to move on, I said, okay, I've done that for a while. I want to try something else.
I had been in the public service for 31 years in the legal profession, and my target was 30 years. 30 came and went, and I didn't know what I was going to do. There were two young people going into the profession. They were clerking in our office, and if I had left before a certain date, it would have opened up the position for competition. That is what pushed me into it. I went to a funeral viewing, And on the way back, I thought of those two young people who could otherwise get a really good job if I quit. And I pulled over and I called my boss and I said, I'm leaving. There was so much in our community that needed to be attended to. And so I thought I can give more of myself. So now I'm busier than I was when I was practicing law, doing things for the community.
I did about 40 years of engineering work. During that time, I started climbing up the ladder and being groomed for a higher position. But then the politics and the management, all of that stuff started to weigh on me. And, when you had 4 kids and a mortgage and all that's gone, the light bulb suddenly went on. It was like, I don't have to do this anymore. It came to me and says, wait a minute, I like to ride motorcycles. I like to teach. So I became an instructor. I was able to open my own business in instructing students how to ride motorcycles. I always like to joke, my work week was Saturday to Sunday and my weekend was Monday to Friday. I look back at it now and I go, man, why didn't I start that earlier? But 65 rolled around eventually and it was like, okay, it's time to find some new adventures.
Some callers on Cross Country Checkup yesterday responding to the question, when did you decide it was time to step down from a job or something important to you? We're at 11 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa for the next couple of weeks. U.S. President Joe Biden is coming off a crucial weekend for his re-election efforts. He has been dogged by questions over his political future since his poor debate performance last month against rival Donald Trump. Biden sat down for a make-or-break interview on Friday, seeking to reassure Americans about his candidacy. Here's from part of that interview with George Stephanopoulos from ABC News.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in.
Well, I just had a bad night.
Are you the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes.
Do you dispute that there have been more lapses, especially in the last several months?
Can I run the 110 flat? No. But I'm still in good shape.
Are you more frail?
No.
Paul Waldman is a columnist with MSNBC joining us from Washington, D.C. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Was he effective in reassuring Americans that he can serve for a second term?
I don't know that he was really all that effective. It certainly wasn't a disaster on the scale of his debate performance, but I don't think that anyone who watched that would really have had their concerns assuaged. The truth is that he is much more frail than he was, and his decline in the last 4 years has been visible. Now, you can still say that he's perfectly capable of doing the job of president, but I think the biggest concern people have is if he is having trouble now in a lot of settings, kind of putting his thoughts together in a coherent way, what is he going to be like in a year or 2 years or 4 years when he's approaching his 86th birthday, which he will at the end of his second term? So you really have two things going on simultaneously right now. There's the kind of reality of where Biden is at, however you decide to judge that. And then there's a real media frenzy that's going on. If you opened up the pages of the New York Times or the Washington Post today, you would see a dozen articles about Joe Biden's age. They have entire teams of reporters who have been assigned to this story. They're churning out piece after piece. It is all anyone is talking about in the political world. And that creates its own kind of momentum. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. So there are now about 9 or 10 Democratic members of Congress who have come out and said publicly that they think he should step aside. More are probably going to be coming. That creates pressure. And now you're in this dynamic where Democratic politicians are wondering about whether they can, how this is going to affect their own political fortunes, whether Biden can win. And he is being defiant at the moment. But it's a situation of enormous tension within the Democratic Party, and no one is quite sure how this is going to resolve itself.
How do you envision the war room is what those conversations are like in the Democrats' war room about what they do, whether you're on the Biden team or part of the team who's now calling for him to step down?
Yeah, I think this is painful for everybody. All Democrats really think that he has done an excellent job as president. And at the same time, I think that what happened in the debate was not only shocking on its own terms, but I think it caused a lot of people to kind of reevaluate how they've been looking at him for the last couple of years and whether they've been honest with themselves about what the future would hold for him. And I think a lot of them are saying, I decided to sort of put this out of my mind, or I convinced myself that it wasn't as bad as it really looked. And at the same time, when you talk about the Biden campaign, he has his family who are apparently, from the reporting that we have, telling him to tough it out. And he's got an inner circle of advisors who have been with him for decades who are probably telling him the same thing. And he has a story that he tells himself about his political career, which is that he's a scrapper and a fighter and that people count him out, and he ends up coming back and, making a comeback and then ultimately succeeding. That's the way Joe Biden thinks about himself, and that is the way that he's talking about himself in public now. But the trouble is that it's hard to see how things are going to get better from him. I mean, he's not going to get any younger. And now we're in this really intense, brief period. The election is only 4 months away. And really over the next couple of weeks, he's going to have to make a final decision on whether he stays in this race.
The Republican National Convention kicks off next week. How do you envision they're going to be using the interview, the debate performance as they continue with their push?
Yeah, we don't really know yet. I mean, they may spend a lot of the time at their convention talking about Biden and about his age. They're also inevitably going to spend a lot of time talking about Donald Trump. And it's sort of ironically, that's much better for the Biden campaign. We think about conventions as a 4-day-long television ad that parties use to put their best foot forward. But the truth is that Trump has never been popular. And the more people are reminded about the things they don't like about him, the better it is for Democrats. And so, there's almost no news about Trump, which is not something that often happens right now. And I think that Democrats are probably looking forward to the Republican convention because at least it takes some of the heat off of them and has people focus again on Trump. And that may be better for the Biden campaign. So I think that that's something that Democrats are probably looking forward to.
What do you think folks like you will be watching for? I mean, there are a lot of political science folks and people who have a real stake in this. They're all sort of watching very closely. What are you watching for?
Yeah, I mean, we have to see how things change within the Democratic Party, how many more elected Democrats come out and say that Biden should step aside, and how he does in public over the next week or so. There's a NATO summit happening in Washington the last few days. They're going to supposedly give a press conference on Thursday. And now every time Biden appears in public in an unscripted setting, which he does not often do, the stakes get raised. And so we'll have to see how he performs. And if he has further struggles, then the pressure is going to become really intense for him to step aside.
Paul, always good to chat with you. Thanks for making time today. Take good care.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Paul Waldman, columnist with MSNBC. He is in Washington, D.C. Now, Paul was talking about the big NATO meeting. There is a story on cbcnews.ca about expectations for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and what some folks, including a former ambassador, has to say about what he needs to say during this time. Stay tuned for that online, cbcnews.ca. We're going to head, though, first to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. And Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is going to soon be able to detect weapons using artificial intelligence. Sherrod Health says it's going to test out the new detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and the crisis response centre. Analysts say the technology is not sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. Bonding through basketball in River Osborne. Dozens of young players came out to the opening of the upgraded courts at the Mayfair Recreation Centre yesterday. We'll take you there in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. If you're planning on heading to the courts there today, put some sunscreen on because we're expecting 7 or high UV index conditions. It's also going to be hot. The humidity is already at 100% today, expecting a temperature high of 27, but with a humidex, it'll feel like 30. We'll give you a full look at your forecast. Still to come here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. We're also going to talk about tipping To tip or not to tip? It is the question Information Radio has been asking here on the program. We'll hear what an expert has to say about tipping culture, including whether it makes a difference if you tip in cash or using a credit card. In our 7 o'clock hour of the program, bringing the mind and body together through somatic therapy. It is a practice that people are now trying to help treat their anxiety, but does it work? Our community reporter Shanley Vidal finds out. Stay tuned for that conversation coming up in our next hour of the program. You are listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Goodbye to the folks watching on the television. If you're on YouTube, well, we'll see you still to come here. If you see issues on your commute this morning, call our traffic line, 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. May McKillop, our studio director, is waiting for your call. Vaughan is closed between Graham and the Promenade, and Kennedy closed at Portage. That's for the next few days here until the 10th. And a reminder that there are no more school speed zones. But if you do see folks there, be aware of the kids playing there. Lots to come here on the program in our next half hour and next hour and a half of the program. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
On the current. And so going into the Olympics, right, this is going to be my first one. I'm definitely going to be nervous. I'm definitely going to be anxious.
I'm Mark Kelly. Christopher Morales-Williams is set to be Canada's next big track star. But after training by himself as a teen during the pandemic, he's now found ways for running to bring him joy. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The election is over, but France's political future is still uncertain. The far right did not win a majority. Centrist and left-wing parties worked together to knock the National Rally back to third place. A far-left alliance won the most votes, but not enough for a majority. And it could be weeks before the exact makeup of France's government is hammered out. Our senior international correspondent, Margaret Evans, is in Paris.
Thousands from the French left flocked to Republic Square in the center of Paris as exit polls were released, chanting, "We won," and celebrating what was for many an unexpected victory deep into the night.
We're just super happy, it's an insane moment for us. We've been so stressed for the past couple of weeks.
29-year-old Bénédicte Calat says first prize was to block the far right, and in particular the populist anti-immigrant National Rally, or RN.
And the second beautiful surprise, and which is the most exciting, is that the left actually won this election. So we really hope we're going to have a leftist government.
That's by no means a given. Leftist and centrist parties reversed last week's first-round win for the RN through strategic voting, knocking it into third place. French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist bloc came second. None, though, have a majority, and even within those broad groupings, there are plenty of differences, pointing to political stalemate ahead and, says analyst Nicole Baccaran, a much weakened Macron at home and abroad.
Any commitment that President Macron and then at some point the next government would take will be weak, could be toppled over by any kind of vote in this very strange National Assembly that we have now.
The far right, RN, says it will live on to fight another day. Sunday's vote was a blow, but they still increased their seat tally by more than 50. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Paris.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia fired more than 40 missiles at his country overnight. They hit the capital, Kiev, as well as several other cities in eastern Ukraine. Zelensky says the Russian rockets damaged residential buildings, electricity substations, and a children's hospital. Officials say at least 20 people were killed. About 50 others were injured. This week's NATO anniversary meeting in Washington could be uncomfortable for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. In public, the allies say they are all focused on the threat Russia poses to Ukraine. But behind closed doors, Canada could be berated for its military spending. It is among one of the few allies without a detailed plan to spend 2% of its GDP on defense. The CBC's Murray Brewster has more.
Carrie Buck is Canada's former ambassador to NATO and describes the 2% metric this way.
It's used as a political club.
Going into the Washington summit, NATO leaders have made it clear they want to see a plan from each nation on how to get to 2% if they aren't there already. 23 of 32 allies meet the threshold.
And no doubt, unless there's a signal before the summit, Canada will get beaten about the head and shoulders with that club.
Buck says her experience at NATO was that all of the naming and shaming goes on behind closed doors at bilateral meetings. When leaders are all together, however, names are not mentioned. Instead, stats showing each country's contribution are flashed up on the screen. Jens Stoltenberg is NATO's soon-to-be retiring Secretary General.
We agreed last year that 2% was a minimum, so of course we have more to do. And I expect that at Washington we'll then also strengthen the message about defense spending, or make sure that allies are delivering.
Canada currently has a plan to get to 1.76% of GDP by the end of the decade. The Liberal government promises even more spending, which is yet to be approved, and that it will eventually push the country over the 2% line. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
For the past 12 months, the global average temperature has been the highest on record. The European Union's climate agency says June was also the warmest month ever recorded. Copernicus found that last month was the 12th in a row to hit at least 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial average temperatures. Bill Merrifield is a research scientist at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
It is an indication that we are getting close to that threshold. It won't be this year or next year, but sometime in the next decade or two.
World leaders have agreed to try to stay below a 1.5 temperature threshold. It is part of the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Experts say a global El Niño weather pattern has played a role in driving up temperatures. Hurricane Beryl has made landfall in Texas. The Category 1 storm is whipping up along the coastline, bringing winds of around 130 kilometers an hour. Hundreds of thousands of people are now without power, and weather warnings and alerts have been issued for much of the southeast coast. Freelance reporter Jennifer Glass has the latest.
There are widespread flood watches across eastern Texas as the slow-moving Hurricane Beryl hit the state at Matagorda Bay, south of Galveston. The National Hurricane Center projected storm surges of up to 7 feet along the Gulf coastline, with inland flooding also anticipated, especially in the Houston-Galveston region.
It's a serious storm, and you must take it seriously and be prepared.
Acting Governor Dan Patrick declared a state of emergency in 121 counties.
Let's pray nothing happens where you live, but something is going to happen where some of you live. And that something will be significant wind, significant rain, and some flooding, and again, surge along the coast.
More than 7 million people were under tornado watches and tens of thousands without power as Beryl hit the Lone Star State, bringing sustained winds, heavy rain, and flooding. Schools have been closed in the region, and the U.S. Coast Guard shut the major ports in Houston, Texas City, Freeport, and Galveston. Oil producers have paused production and evacuated their workers from offshore platforms ahead of the storm. Last week, Beryl was a Category 5 hurricane, devastating islands in the Caribbean. It's now moving slowly northward through Texas Monday and heading towards the U.S. Midwest and the Great Lakes later in the week, bringing more rain, flooding, and severe weather in its path. Jennifer Glass for CBC News, New Smyrna Beach, Florida.
Boeing has agreed to plead guilty to a criminal fraud conspiracy charge. It resolves a U.S. Justice Department investigation into 2 fatal crashes involving 737 MAX aircraft. Boeing also agreed to pay a $243 million fine. The plea deal requires a judge's approval. It would brand the plane maker a convicted felon in connection with crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia in 2018 and 2019. A total of 346 people were killed. Family members plan to fight the agreement. CBC News has learned $2 million of taxpayer money has been spent investigating the Durham Regional Police Service east of Toronto. The Ontario Civilian Police Commission started looking into alleged criminal activity, cronyism, and harassment in 2019. But there have been delays, and now there are questions about whether the investigation will ever get clear answers. Julie Ireton reports.
Allegations against the Durham Regional Police Service include ignoring sexual harassment, intimidating subordinates, and allowing so-called untouchables to get away with criminal activity. 5 years on, the inquiry into these serious allegations continues with no resolution in sight. The Ontario Civilian Police Commission blames the Durham force for keeping documents secret and stymieing the process with unsuccessful court motions. For its part, the Durham Police Services Board blames the Commission for the lag. Meanwhile, the force and its board have spent more than $2 million on legal fees, and the Commission has racked up its own undisclosed costs. Donardo Jones is a law professor with the University of Windsor. He researches police oversight.
$2 million of taxpayer money is being used to stymie oversight and stymie accountability for police officers who are supposed to be standard bearers when it comes to upholding the law.
Since the provincial investigation began, several Durham police leaders have resigned or retired. The commission itself is set to dissolve according to a new Ontario law. Jones says much needs to be done to increase accountability in policing, and Durham is just one example.
We know that a lot of these issues are quite systemic.
No provincial or municipal authorities would speak to CBC about the Durham inquiry. Tribunals Ontario says it continues to work diligently on its adjudicative and investigative caseload. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage & Spence. I'm sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Coming up in this hour of the program, bringing the mind and body together through somatic therapy. It is a practice that people are now trying to help treat their anxiety, but does it work? Our community reporter Shanley Vidal finds out. Stay tuned for that conversation. Also ahead, short-term vacation rentals have been an issue for residents in the rural municipality of Gimli. Some have been unhappy with how owners manage them. But this summer, the RM has a new bylaw in place to help address some of those concerns. We'll hear about that. First, though, to tip or not to tip? It is the question Information Radio has been asking. We'll hear from an expert coming up next. Stay tuned. First, though, let's head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. And Heather Wells joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, tension at a Winnipeg private school over the Israel-Hamas war is not surprising to a professor of peace and conflict studies. A group of parents at St. John's Ravenscourt have raised concern about bullying and the way the school responded to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. University of Manitoba professor Adam Muller says it reflects the stress and strain in the broader community. We'll hear more. And Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is about to become the second hospital in Canada to use artificial intelligence to detect weapons. Shared Health says it's going to test out the new detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and the crisis response center. Analysts say the technology is not sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. Those stories and more in our next news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. We're at 12 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Hello to the folks watching us online on YouTube. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. So far, no new closures or major delays to tell you about, but if you see anything, call our commuter line. May McKillop, our studio director, is waiting for your phone call, 2047-883-093, 2047-883-093. Abby Ediemi is following the weather forecast because it's going to get hot.
Yeah, we're enjoying some sunny sunrise here in the city. 18 degrees in the downtown. I expect a mix of sun and clouds today. A slim chance of showers late in the afternoon. Along with that, a risk of thunderstorm. Be advised, it will be hazy. We will get to a high of 27, but it's going to feel hotter than that. Tonight, we will have partly cloudy skies with a good chance of showers early in the evening. A risk of thunderstorm to go with that, and it's still going to remain hazy overnight. But if that rain comes, then we might just cool down to 15 degrees. Other parts of the province, we're seeing 14 in Brandon at the moment. Thompson is also at 14. Churchill at 13. Dauphin 15. Other parts of the regions like 15s and 17. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 18 degrees. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. A high of 27 and a chance of showers and thunderstorm this afternoon.
Coming up to 14 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Last week, we started a conversation around the tipping culture, be it for food, haircuts, a cup of coffee. It is one of the most read stories at cbcnews.ca today. We've also heard a lot of responses from listeners about what you think. To break down some common questions about tipping, we have Corey Mintz, food reporter and author of the book The Next Supper, The End of Restaurants as We Knew Them and What Comes After. Corey is on the line now. Hello.
Good morning.
Corey, I mean, tipping used to only be at restaurants. Now, so many places have them, including hair salons. What is going on here? Why is that?
Well, tipping is sort of enjoying its creep moment over the last 3 years. It's not only, as you say, expanded tip creep from the traditional locations of restaurants to hair salons, groceries, bakeries, cafes, places where we didn't used to expect to be presumed or asked or prompted to tip, but also the percentage that we're being asked to tip has increased. It used to be based on a societal norm of people said 15 when I was growing up, people said 20 later when I worked in the industry and became a regular patron, but also changed from physical to digital because it used to be simply based on what we expected and we paid in cash. But now that 90% of transactions are digital, it's all through payment terminals. And the prompts have gone from, say, 12 to 18 to maybe 18 to 25 to even 30. I've heard, I've never seen, but 35%.
Right. I've seen 28% is when this became something that I noticed. You were talking about how in the past it was about cash and about having change for as the tip there. Now, because of the tapping culture as well, what's your sense of who gets the money when you tip? But particularly, is there a difference between the tip when it comes to giving cash versus when you use a credit card or a debit card?
That's a great question, and the answer is none whatsoever. If you ever go to a restaurant and there is a disclaimer on the menu saying, our tips go to X, Y, Z, right. We divide 30% for these employees, 20%. If you ever see that, then you know. If you don't see that, and I have never seen that, then you can never presume. I've been writing about tips, talking to people about tips. I have like a 10,000-word chapter in the book about tips.
Right.
I would never presume to know where tips are going because there's no transparency around it.
It's really interesting because whenever, and this is something I started doing some time ago, where I would ask, what is your tip out rate? What is that like? Where does the tip go to? But something that I've been asking now is, are you actually going to get this if I tip with a card? And the look on most folks' faces, I can't read minds, but the body language is pretty remarkable. Do you think there should be transparency around where your tips are going and not rely on folks like you and me to ask?
Yeah, I do. And the conversation you just described, it's an awkward one. And when I feel compelled to have that, I usually try to reach out like via email to the owner, because I just feel like I don't want to put employees on the spot to have this conversation. But I think the first way you phrase it is just fine. Like, unless there's a line of people behind you, they're pressed for time. Hey, can you tell me how this is divided? I'd love to know, particularly because I care about how I support this business. But yes, I think that tips aren't going anywhere anytime soon. They are enshrined in law. They have been since, I think, the 1930s. It's, Canada and the U.S. and most states and provinces, you can pay people less legally because they're tipped. Institutionally, they're not going anywhere because they really need all actors across the industry to do something about it at the same time. I don't see that happening, but I think it's entirely possible to mandate transparency around them, to make it a rule saying that if you are a business that, come on, let's be honest, depends on tips, because if you are expecting 20% of your revenue to flow through, what the CRA deems gifts from consumers, but you have to have a thing on your menu, on your website, saying where that money is going to.
Is there a time when it's not appropriate to tip? Have those situations sort of come up for you?
Not for me. I mean, I've just sort of accepted, like, I'm paddling against this tide, and I've always simply, I used to be a cook. I became a restaurant critic, and following that, I've always tipped 20%. You could dump a pot of coffee on my head, and I'd leave 20% just because I figured I don't want the reputation going around that I'm a cheapskate.
Right.
Even if it's not reflective of that. But nowadays, like, if I go somewhere, I went to a sort of a fancy grocery shop that had a coffee stand in it, and there was a tip prompt when I was buying like a loaf of sourdough and a bag of pasta. And it wasn't that I was like, how dare they, even though I felt that, but it was more like, well, I got to take out my camera and take a picture and maybe write a newspaper column about this. It's sort of like, well, I got to do my job now.
I want to go back to something you were talking about. Instead of expecting customers to supplement folks' wages with tips, there are people saying that it's time for businesses to step up and pay a living wage. Pretty complicated frame there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that if you can't pay people a living wage, then you're not really a job creator. And I think depending on tips for earnings is not the same as paying a wage. I'm an advocate of businesses, indexing their wages to a living wage. In Winnipeg, I think it's $18 or $19, and that's for a single person with no dependents. I worked with a restaurant to help them transition to a no tipping model, and step one was like figuring out, what do you actually have to pay people to live in this city? It's essential. But I think the hospitality industry, bars and restaurants, have just operated for a century on a very different structure, which is, and it's based on a post-slavery United States era where they said, how can we figure out a way to not pay people we weren't paying before? And the answer is, let's get customers to pay them. And, a century later, you have artificially suppressed menu prices that seem more appealing because we're hiding 1/5 of the actual cost of your meal.
This conversation is going to continue because tipping culture, I think, will continue to evolve. Corey, it's always good to chat with you. Take good care. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Corey Mintz, food reporter, author of the book The Next Supper, The End of Restaurants as We Knew Them and What Comes After. Let us know whether you ask about where your tip goes. How do you do it? 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205. Do you think your life's going to change if you go to places that have living wages and don't require tips? You can, of course, email info@cbc.ca as well.
Hi, I'm Paul Havershrud, host of The Cost of Living, a national business show that looks at everything the world of money touches, which, admittedly, is a lot of stuff.
The Cost of Living. Go beyond the facts and figures and discover the compelling business stories that affect the day-to-day lives of Canadians right across the country. Economics, business, and you. The Cost of Living with host Paul Havershrud. Available now on CBC Listen.
Coming up to 7:22 here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Still to come, we're going to take soccer to the skies. We'll hear from some teenagers playing a new version of soccer using drones. That's still to come here on the program. First, though, Cuff the Duke has a new record. This one's called Got You on the Run.
Oh, I know I can't get far when I'm lost without a cause. All the while I'm standing still, and oh, I got you on the run. Oh, I got you on the run. I add it up day by day, the over-under odds I play, and when it hits I can never say it. Oh, I got you on the run. Oh, I got you on the run. When everything around me blurs, my hands go numb, the shadow returns, the light is lit but slowly burns. Oh, I got you on the run. Oh, I got you on the run. The joy around me slips away, a deficit I can't repay. The world moves on, but here I stay. Oh, I got you on the run. Oh, I got you on the run. When everything around me blurs, my hands go numb, the shadow returns, the light is lit but slowly burns. Oh, I got you on the run. Oh, I got you on the run. Every step I take, there are 2 steps the wrong way. Every word I say, there are 2 words that couldn't wait. Maybe this time I can make it. Ooh, I got you on the run. Ooh, I got you on the run.
That was Cuff the Duke with Got You on the Run. Their new album is called Breaking Dawn, and it comes out September 6th. We're at 25 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Scott Regehr joining us now with a look at your sports. Hello, Scott.
Hey there, Faith.
Pretty much like Christmas Eve for Canadian soccer fans, right? What do you think ahead of tomorrow's big match against Argentina?
Well, that I never thought I'd see a Canadian men's team in a position like this in my life of watching footy, Faith. In the semifinals of the Copa America, an event that's been around for more than a century, the oldest of any of the continental competitions. And to do this against the reigning World Cup champions who boast, in the twilight of his career, mind you, probably the greatest player we've ever seen in Lionel Messi. The best bit, though, about tomorrow night's game, though, Faith, for me, is that Canada belongs there. They outplayed the Venezuelans in the quarterfinals, and in my view, anyhow, with some better refereeing. Shared view, by the way. They might have won this going away. Canada's been fantastic. They're playing with confidence, not with fear. And that approach, the hallmark of their new coach, Jesse Marsh.
We're excited about where we are in our development and that we have earned the right to give it another shot. Argentina will have to be the best game that we could possibly play, and it still might not be enough. But whatever. We're going to go for it. We're going to gather ourselves. We're going to physically recharge and regenerate, and we're going to go for the game of our lives. And we'll be excited for it, and we won't back down.
I like that. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, right? Brash, right? And Jesse Marsh, I love this, right? Because a lot of people thought he should be the head coach of the U.S. which was the first CONCACAF team ousted from this Copa America under their other coach, everybody's writing, why did we let Jesse Marsh go? And he's just loving this right now for Canada. But one other thing, Alphonso Davies is the undeniable star of the Canadian show. He's not even been, for me, in the top 5 best players for Canada at the Copa America. The best players have been this incredible winger that's really blossomed under Jesse Marsh, Jacob Schaffelberg from Nova Scotia, Alistair Johnson on defense, and the goalie, Max Crepeau. Those have been the top 3. This has been a collective effort, and they have the collective mentality that they can beat any team. Can you imagine if they beat Lionel Messi in Argentina in maybe his last big tournament and make it to the final of the Copa America? I can't even believe I'm uttering these words right now, but boy, it is like Christmas Eve, that's for sure, for soccer fans. Mm-hmm.
So far.
Well, in men's basketball, Faith, Canada it looks like it's going to be in the group of death at the Paris Olympics. I say that because after qualifying over the weekend, Canada's group is going to be comprised of Australia, Giannis Antetokounmpo, maybe the best player on earth on his day, suiting up for Greece, thus the group of death scenario. In the 3,000 meters, Charles Philibert Thibodeau from Quebec set a new Canadian record yesterday. He'll compete in the 1,500 in Paris. And in Olympic adjacent news, what a performance, Faith, by cyclist Derek G yesterday. The Ottawa native finished 3rd in yesterday's leg of the Tour de France, a hectic stage marked by relentless attacks on a largely gravel road. Here's Derek G.
Coming away that close to the win, but not getting it. But it was a cool day. That was a really iconic stage, and I think raced super aggressive. We were aggressive all day. I think we were on the front foot, and we raced the right way, and came up a little short.
Month, Faith, he finished the prestigious Criterium du Dauphin, and his form is about as good as it could be at the moment, and that bodes well for Paris, obviously, coming up in a couple of weeks.
Just before you go, things are looking out for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, and they could scarcely look elsewhere. Bottom of the AL East, but they did beat the Mariners yesterday on a George Springer 3-run home run, and they won that Francisco tomorrow, Faith. And the Winnipeg Goldeyes, they were unable to get the series win yesterday. They fell 8-5 to Fargo Moorhead. Next up for the Goldeyes, game tomorrow. They're at home to the Kansas City Monarchs.
It's going to be a fun game. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Scott Gare from your CBC National Sports Desk. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. No major closures or delays to tell you about on your commute, but if you see something, let us know. 204-788-3093. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 18 degrees, mix of sun and clouds. We'll feel the humidity again today. A high of 27 with a humidex at 30. Tension at a Winnipeg private school over the Israel-Hamas war doesn't come as a surprise to a professor of peace and conflict studies. A group of parents at St. John's Ravenscourt has raised concerns about bullying and the way the school responded to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. The group says a letter sent by the school to families was one-sided by only blaming Hamas and not including more historical context. The school won't comment on specific concerns, but says it strives to be a welcoming place for students of all backgrounds. University of Manitoba professor Adam Muller says it reflects the stress and strain in the broader community.
Even the international courts are challenged to adjudicate coherently when it comes to, say, for example, the claim that there's been a genocide committed in Gaza. So we shouldn't expect the schools to have an easier time of it.
Muller suggests schools have a process to address the conflict that doesn't segregate students. He says schools should bring students together and help resolve issues that divide them. Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre will soon be able to detect weapons using artificial intelligence. Shared Health says it will test out the new AI detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and the crisis response center. They will scan and send an alert to security if something like a knife or a gun is detected. Dr. Sean Young is the Chief Operating Officer at HSC.
If you're using metal detector technology, it means you have to pause, you need to take all the metal out. You could cause a backlog and a wait as well, whereas this technology is much more seamless. You just walk through as if you're just walking through a doorway. It's just a much more seamless way to be able to ensure safety than traditional methods.
Analysts say the technology isn't sophisticated enough to detect all weapons, but Young says it's just one of many measures the hospital's taking to improve security. The HSC would become the second hospital in Canada to use this technology. In Washington today, Democratic senators are set to discuss whether Joe Biden ought to continue his campaign for a second term as U.S. president. Already, a number of leading congressmen are leaning towards asking Biden to step down. Among them, Adam Schiff has some advice for Biden.
Seek out the opinions of people you trust. He's obviously talked to his family about this, and that's important. But he should seek out people with some distance and objectivity. He should seek out pollsters who are not his own pollsters. He should take a moment to make the best informed judgment. And if the judgment is run, then run hard and beat that SOB.
Schiff referring there to Donald Trump. He did not name any replacement during his NBC interview on Sunday, but said Vice President Kamala Harris would resoundingly beat Donald Trump. Ukrainian officials say Kyiv was bombarded overnight by a series of Russian missile strikes. It's the biggest bombardment the Ukrainian capital has seen in months. Among the buildings hit, a children's hospital. One of the early estimates suggests as many as 10 deaths, with substantial damage to infrastructure through eastern Ukraine. Well, with wind gusts exceeding 120 kilometers an hour and torrential rain, Hurricane Beryl has made land in southern Texas.
It will be a deadly storm for people who are directly in that path. Rain is going to be everywhere, and flooding could be everywhere, and a storm surge from Corpus to Galveston Island.
Acting Texas Governor Dan Patrick warning people along the entire Texas coastline to stay off the roads. A series of evacuation orders are in effect, and already hundreds of thousands of people are without power. The first major city in Beryl's path is Houston, and that arrival is expected at some point later this morning. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Bonding through basketball in River Osborne.
Keep your head up. Keep your head up. Keep pounding. Keep pounding. Yeah.
Dozens of young players came out to the opening of upgraded courts at the Mayfair Rec Center yesterday. One of the courts was refurbished, another was built brand new. The project was an undertaking between nonprofit Basketball and Borders and the Winnipeg Sea Bears. Basketball and Borders CEO Justin Lee says basketball brings people together.
We use basketball as a way to provide opportunities for youth and to really, find something to love, which has, for us, been basketball growing up. So I think having events like this just ultimately promote people to pick up a basketball and to play the game, or just be in an inclusive space, which is what it's all about as well.
The day also included a skills camp, competition, and local all-star game. You can find more on these stories. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. So far, no closures or delays, big ones to tell you about, but if you see something on your commute, 204-788-3093. You heard in the newscast with Heather there, the brand new court, very beautiful court. If you're going to be heading there today, you might take note, Abby Adiemi, it's going to be hot, isn't it?
Yeah, you should gear up for a humid day ahead. If you're going to be doing anything outdoors, get your water bottles, some ice cubes, and just try to hydrate yourself throughout the day because it's going to be a humid day. 18 degrees in the city. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds with showers likely by late afternoon, possibly accompanied by thunderstorms and haze. The highs will climb up to 27, though it's going to feel hotter than that due to the humidity. And tonight we'll see partly cloudy conditions stay with us. That chance of showers is still going to be in the forecast, and then it's going to cool down to 15. And for tomorrow, it's going to be a sunny stat. Brandon currently at 14, partly cloudy also. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today with showers possible late in the afternoon. A chance of thunderstorm also to go with that, and haze. Highs would warm up to 27, feeling more like a 32 for folks in Brandon, so brace for that. Moving north to Thompson, good morning. You are currently at 14 degrees and it's mostly cloudy at the moment. Today it's going to be mainly sunny with haze, and the highs will get to 28. Slightly breezy conditions expected, and for tonight it will be partly cloudy with showers likely and a risk of thunderstorm and continued haze. Further north in Churchill, 13 degrees, and we're seeing some misty conditions at the moment. Expect mainly cloudy skies today with a good chance of showers in the afternoon. Highs will be around 18 degrees with some breezy conditions. Darwin is currently sitting at 15 and sunny at the moment. Expect the sunny conditions to mix with clouds later and a slight chance of showers in the afternoon and some thunderstorms to go with that. Highs around 26 degrees, though it's going to feel hotter than that. In Gimli, it's currently 17 degrees and cloudy for the Interlake region today. Expect a mix of sun and clouds, a chance of showers in the afternoon, and we'll be seeing a high of 27. Steinbach is sitting at 15 and cloudy at the moment. Today, expect a mix of sun and clouds with a slight chance of showers also in the forecast and thunderstorms. We'll see highs near 27. And for our friends in Morris, good morning to you. Currently, you are at 14 degrees and cloudy for the Pembina Valley region. Anticipate a mix of sun and clouds, a slight chance of showers in the afternoon and thunderstorms, and the highs will be around 27 with haze. And of course, tonight you see partly cloudy skies in the evening and showers possible alongside with that hazy condition you'll be seeing. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 18. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today, and we'll get to a high of 27.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Sabi Adiemi, our tech producer. May McKillop is our director today. Hello to the folks who are watching on YouTube as you do your morning crossword puzzle. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Lots to come this half hour. Short-term rentals, vacation rentals have been an issue for residents in the rural municipality of Gimli. Some unhappy with how owners manage them. But this summer, the RM has a new bylaw to help address some of those concerns. We'll hear more about it still to come. First, though, at 21 minutes before 8 o'clock, it is a sensation you may be familiar with. You are feeling panicked, and your body's response is to go into fight or flight mode. That kind of reaction may be a necessary tool where there is a potential for danger, but for some, an increased heart rate and a hollow feeling in the chest are a regular occurrence, even when there's no present danger. Now, a growing number of Manitobans are using a particular holistic approach to treat their anxiety or trauma. CBC Manitoba community reporter Shanley Vidal is here to explain more about somatic therapy. Hi, Shanley.
Good morning, Faith.
Okay, you have some firsthand knowledge and experience with somatics. Tell us how this therapy works.
Well, I've been doing some research about this after seeing many people on social media taking up the practice. So I recently met with somatic practitioner Joy Honestchuk in Winnipeg. I was taken into a small room with a couch and some chairs. There were small round mirrors on the wall, and on top of that couch was a yellow toy octopus named Oliver. I wasn't sure what to expect because I was told that the sessions are different for each person depending on what they need. I was asked to wear comfortable clothing. I was told we would be doing some somatic inquiry, breathing, and gentle movement. She also asked me to check on myself, to consider what was going on with me physically, like feeling tension or stuck, or maybe even like being on overdrive. The first half of the session involved a lot of talking, but first I was asked to focus on something in the room that brought me comfort as a way to ground me.
That talking, how was it helpful?
Well, it made me think about how my body would instinctively react in certain situations where there's that feeling of fight or flight. It's a physiological reaction that increases hormones in situations that could seem stressful or frightening. Here's Joy to explain.
When we're in fight-flight, we have this big adrenaline surge of cortisol and adrenaline and all this energy to help us literally lift a car off someone or jump over the fence. It's a huge amount of energy. And if we don't do anything with that energy, then that energy is stored like a charge in our nervous system, and it might come out later.
So that charge of energy can come out, and it might make some people react aggressively. Others might shrink down into themselves.
So then how do you get rid of it?
Well, it was strange because it's not like your typical therapy, like just talking it out. There's physical movements that I was told to try, and here's one of the movements that Joy showed me.
Just like you're chopping wood, you know, feet wide apart, nice big stance. You're gonna take your arms overhead. Ha! Ha! Ha!
Yeah, and that really surprised me. I am literally trying to chop invisible wood with an invisible axe. It surprised me that it felt really natural. And other movements that were demonstrated included putting your hands on the wall and then gently pushing away. There's also rocking your body in a gently swaying manner. And one interesting movement was to shake off the excess energy off the ends of your fingers as if it were literally dripping away.
So how did that all feel for you?
Well, it was strange because that's not the kind of thing I would typically do, you know, especially when you add in using your voice, because it seemed weird, but it actually just really surprised me because I felt a little bit more relaxed. It felt really natural.
So in the way you've described it, it sounds like it's more than just doing exercises, right?
Yes, it is. Practitioners say it's about trying to regulate your nervous system through movement and cognizance, basically focusing on your emotional triggers in a safe space and learning how they show up in your body. So, for example, if you feel anxious when you think about speaking in public, that might make your heartbeat faster, weaken your legs, tense up your shoulders. But if you learn to understand your own mind-body connection, you can hopefully better manage that physical pain brought on by emotional triggers. Here's what Joy had to say about that.
I think that a lot of people have done a lot of self-work through talk therapy and cognitively understanding what's going on for them, and they still feel stuck somehow, like something isn't fully resolved in their body. And the cognitive understanding is really important, and it has its limitations. It only goes so far. Whereas when we are able to begin to feel in our bodies and process at the body level, then that's where things have more opportunity for resolution.
Shanley, I remember doing something like this or talking about this maybe 14 years ago, and what folks in the scientific community, they did not have very nice things to say about this. What do we know now about the science behind this alternative therapy?
Well, interestingly enough, there's actually not a lot of detailed exploration on the subject. However, according to an article published by Harvard Health, scant scientific research has been done on its potential benefits, but anecdotally, researchers have heard patients describe tremendous benefits from it.
There will be listeners out there who might be hearing about somatics for the first time. How would you characterize how popular it is here?
There is definitely a growing interest. Joy told me she's seeing a lot of clients. I also spoke with Megan Land McCarthy, an occupational therapist who specializes in something called somatic experiencing, and that work also involves touch. Megan told me that she has a year-long wait list for new clients, and on average, 5 people reach out to her every week inquiring about her services. And she says that many of her clients are regulars who have been seeing her long term.
This isn't a one-off car accident that we're working with. This is a lifelong experience and how they view every relationship, what their triggers are. So it's not surface level. Like, this is very internal. It's shaped their entire, what we call theory of mind, how they view themselves, how they view others. So it's so personal, and doing this work is very, very intense, and it creates a lot of vulnerability that a lot of these people have found ways to manage that vulnerability. And so we're peeling back those layers. And to talk about that it's really challenging. And it's even challenging when they come in and we're doing the work. There's a lot of clients that'll, I don't know if I can do this.
Given how vulnerable people can be, I imagine these sessions can be pretty personalized.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And, it may not be for everyone. Each session is different depending on, where the client is at in their mental state. Like, each day is a whole new session. Megan told me that when she is saying hello to each client, she's assessing them and looking at things like how they're standing, whether their cheeks are flushed, and if they're holding their breath. And this helps to look at the clients as a whole. And, it could be that a client says, oh, I'm fine, but the body might reveal otherwise.
You've spoken to other folks who have tried this. What are they saying? What have you heard?
Yeah, so I met with Brittany Reed. She is a client of Megan's, and Brittany is a mental health nurse whose job involves high-stress situations. She's learning to listen to her body to help manage that stress.
If I'm walking in the woods and I see a bear, I need to be able to run. But if every day of my life I believe that there's a bear behind me, that's not a super helpful way to live. When I'm in a state of stress or high kind of acuity or presentation, most people start to kind of feel a bit panicky or panic symptoms, or they might, their chest might get tight. Like my feet get cold. It's really easy to ignore that so I can continue to do my job. But if I never understood that my feet getting cold is the quiet alarm of my nervous system, then I'm just constantly in an elevated nervous system because I'm never bringing myself into regulation. So some people, like running really helps them. But because of kind of where I was at, for me, doing really intense activity was actually probably not what was going to help me, because it would mirror like the, quickened heart rate and it would mirror kind of panic symptoms or high stress. So I think everybody's needs are different, and it's really just trying to understand what you need from it.
Shanley, from your unique frame, what would you say you learned from somatic therapy? What else you learned?
Well, it definitely, made me think about paying more attention to my own body. And like Brittany said, listening for those quiet alarms and figuring out, what that might be and how that might reveal some stress or anxiety.
I'll pay attention to this, because if I ever see you pretending to chop wood, I'll know why you're doing it. Thanks for bringing us this story, Shanley.
Thanks so much, Faith.
Manitoba community reporter Shanley Vidal.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Lift off.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
Thanks very much, Janet. And today, the call-in conversation is about the disconnect between younger folks entering the workforce and their employers. Janet's going to speak with workplace conflict consultant Joyce Adidison on that disconnect. You can call our live line 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893, or text us 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. We'll also dig into why youth unemployment is so high in the country. We'll have a conversation with a 20-something in Winnipeg struggling to find work. More on their journey in our next half hour of the program. We're at 10 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. 'Tis the season for short-term rentals, but if your community is having challenges with summer party renters, you may want to follow Gimli's lead. Last summer, the RM was trying to regulate short-term rentals after some local residents complained about the growing number of places available through services like Airbnb. That website alone lists more than 70 accommodations in Gimli, from whole cottages and apartments to tiny homes and single homes. This summer, there is a new bylaw to try and keep everyone smiling in the sun. Thora Paulson is a councillor for the RM of Gimli. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Oh, good morning. Thank you.
Talk more about those concerns for residents about the growing number of short-term rentals in the RM of Gimli.
Yeah, so during the last election, it certainly came across very clearly that many of our residents were concerned with the short-term rental industry in our community. So council proceeded with a really wholesome approach to community consultation. And, I'd like to share some stories from that as well. But just to let you know that really brought us together and formulated a regulation process in our community that we implemented this year.
When you say wholesome, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we did online survey. We brought those results together and shared the data in an open house. And then we really just opened the door, for anyone to call us, communicate by email, anyone that had missed any of those opportunities. And the engagement was really quite remarkable.
And so after you had that review and call out for community concerns, you've come up with a bylaw. How will this bylaw address those concerns then?
Yeah. So the bylaw was put in place last December. And so it currently has an application form. So all STRs now in Gimli are expected to be licensed.
And STRs are short-term rentals.
STR short-term rentals, yes. Thank you.
Can you take me through, I mean, for folks who might not attend council meetings or understand sort of the administration of it, how would having something like this, essentially requiring short-term rentals to have a license with an annual cost every year, what are you hoping this will actually do?
So essentially it's putting in that responsibility of good citizenship in operating and a short-term rental, just so then the person that is, or the agency that is operating it, knows that there are regulations, restrictions, requirements. And I know those are sort of big words, but in essence, it's complying with Manitoba Building Code, making sure that there's proper egress windows, fire precautions, and then the bylaws. So our standard bylaws, as we went through the consultation process, really do in fact address most of the concerns that were coming forward, like excess noise, garbage, parking. So all those community concerns, the foundation really already existed. So then we put that into the permit process, making sure that people are aware of our community bylaws.
How do you know that bylaws is the answer to this, that creating this framework, this administrative framework, is something that's going to address all of those things?
Well, it's really the only mechanism that a municipality has to address these types of things. In order to put standards, community standards and regulations, and then enforce them, then the authority must be by bylaw.
You also have an accommodation tax. Talk more about that.
Sure. Yeah, so that is something that is still in progress. We're cautiously optimistic that this effort can provide some much-needed revenue to improve the waterfront area, sort of a tourism investment. So the bylaw, again, has been enacted, but it still requires higher levels of approval before it can be implemented.
You were talking about how you ask folks about their concerns. When you look at people who might have investments in Gimli, for those who live there year-round, for example, how might these efforts that you're undertaking, how might that impact those folks?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And, it kind of takes me back a little bit more sort of back in time, right? Because really people have been renting their cottages or homes, in Gimli for decades. So what we saw happen here in the last 5 years or so was just an expansion of something that really, had been taking place for many, many years. So I think the way I would also look at that question is, when we did that community consultation, a really strong message that I got and council got was that a lot of people, are renting their primary residence or their family-owned cottage, and not necessarily, in a sort of a business corporate sense, but more in just sort of a personal sense where they were able to get, additional family income from these opportunities. And those voices, really came across during the consultation, and just how that opportunity benefits the quality of life of the residents that are doing that.
Thora, thank you for your time today. Take good care.
Okay, thank you, Faith.
Thora
Bye-bye.
Paulson is a counselor for the RM of Gimli. Let's head to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, and Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre will soon be able to detect weapons using artificial intelligence. Shared Health says it's going to test out the new AI detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and at its crisis response centre. Analysts say, though, the technology isn't sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. A group of parents at St. John's Ravenscourt worries about the school's response to the Israel-Hamas war. They described instances of bullying against students who went to the private school wearing a keffiyeh, the scarf often worn by people in Palestine. University of Manitoba professor Adam Muller says he's not surprised by the tension, adding it reflects stress and strain being experienced in the broader community. We'll hear more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. I'm Faith Fundal here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. As you've been hearing, we are digging into why youth unemployment is so high in this country. In our next half hour, a conversation with a 20-something in Winnipeg struggling to find work.
It makes me feel kind of hopeless for wanting to find something that I enjoy doing.
We'll learn more about their journey coming up in our next half hour of the program. Stay tuned for that. Hello to the folks streaming us online on YouTube. Our streaming producer is Brad Lillies. May McKillop is our director. Also on the commuter line, if you see any issues that is bothering you during your commute, 2047-883093, 2047-883093. Abby Adiemi is our technical producer. We are expecting a temperature high of 27 degrees today with a humidex. It's going to feel like 30 because, the humidity is at 100%. Lots to come in our next half hour. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Katie Crutchfield goes by the name Waxahachie, and over the past few years, she's gone from playing basement DIY punk venues to some of the biggest stages on earth. She'll be here to tell you about her music and why she recommends not having any social media accounts.
Been yours for so long.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
When the unexpected happens.
What Fiona has done to Atlantic Canada.
Across the country or around the world.
It's a historic day here in the UK.
We give you the Canadian point of view, reflecting your community.
Story of resilience.
Canada's newscast, The National, on CBC and CBC Gem.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. This past year has been a hot one. The European Union's climate agency has released its latest data. It shows that June was the 12th month in a row to hit temperatures above the pre-industrial era average. And as Anayat Singh reports, it does not bode well for the long-term warming trend.
You're not wrong if it's felt much hotter than usual over the past year. Each of those 12 months have been at least 1.5 degrees warmer than they used to be in pre-industrial times, an unprecedented stretch of hot weather that's played out in climate disasters like floods, fires, and heat waves all over the world. Rob Jackson at Stanford University says it's a warning.
It is an opportunity for a wake-up call, and frankly, nature is telling us what the consequences will be.
1.5 degrees is the temperature threshold that world leaders agreed not to breach in the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. While a single year rising above 1.5 degrees does not mean the Paris limit has been reached, Jackson says it gives a teaser for the climate extremes we might see.
We've sprinted right to the edge of that threshold quickly and quite cavalierly.
The global El Niño weather pattern has played a role in driving up temperatures, which are expected to normalize a bit since it ended last month. But the impact of climate change is clear, according to Bill Merrifield, a research scientist at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
It is an indication that we are getting close to that threshold. It won't be this year or next year, but sometime in the next decade or two.
All further signs, the experts say, to speed up climate action. Inayat Singh, CBC News, Toronto.
Hundreds of thousands of people in Texas are without power. Hurricane Beryl made landfall this morning as a Category 1 storm. That is packing winds up to 130 kilometers per hour as it pummels parts of the state. They're getting hit with heavy rain. Freelance reporter Tony Waterman is in Austin, Texas, and joins me now. Tony, what is the latest on this storm?
Well, for those people living along the Gulf Coast, really from Corpus Christi right up into the Houston area, they are experiencing very heavy rainfall. We are talking about 10 centimeters of rain an hour, damaging winds, and these life-threatening storm surges. Meteorologists are expecting the waters to go as high as 6 feet or about 2 meters. And this is really the most dangerous aspect of any hurricane. It's the water coming from the ocean and then rushing ashore. And actually, the Houston Fire Department this morning has already responded to at least 9 water rescues. And officials are telling people in these low-lying areas that are prone to flooding that did not evacuate yesterday to stay put, to not drive through these floodwaters, to stay away from these downed power lines, and at this point to just wait out the storm.
What is next for Beryl?
Beryl is going to weaken into a tropical storm as it makes its way up through Texas, into Arkansas, and really up through to the east part of the United States. But this is just the first storm in what is expected to be a very, very active hurricane season. Meteorologists are expecting 13 hurricanes this year, which is far more than normal, and they're expected to be quite strong. So Beryl accelerated very quickly. It went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in the span of 48 hours. And this is really has to do with very warm water temperatures. And because these water temperatures are not going to be cooling anytime soon, this is really why this season is going to be quite exceptional, according to meteorologists.
All right. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Freelance reporter Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas. At least 20 people in Ukraine are dead. Dozens more are injured after a wave of Russian missiles hit cities across the country. In Kiev, a crowd of people are rushing to a children's hospital that was hit by a rocket. They're trying to clear away debris at the site. Residential buildings and electricity substations in the capital were also damaged. Here is Mayor Vitaly Klitschko.
We're having right now the people from rubbles of the buildings. One more tragedy for our hometown.
The missile attack also hit cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 40 rockets were fired. Ukraine's defense minister is calling on allies to provide more air defenses. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Russia for a 2-day visit. It is his first trip to the country since the invasion of Ukraine. India and Russia have deep trade relations. India buys Russian oil, and President Vladimir Putin sees Modi as key to countering Western influence in global affairs. But the war in Ukraine has complicated their relationship and pushed Russia closer to China, India's longtime rival. France is entering a new political era, an era where no one party has a majority. Yesterday, voters showed that they do not want the far-right National Rally Party to form government. A left-wing alliance called the New Popular Front won the most seats, but not enough for a majority. As Tom Perry reports, that leaves centrist Emmanuel Macron staying on as president, but leading a second-place party and looking for a new prime minister.
Supporters of the New Popular Front, the hastily formed coalition of left and far-left parties, were celebrating last night, coming out on top in the second round of national voting, halting the far-right National Rally Party that had hoped to win a majority in France's National Assembly.
Ce soir, le Rassemblement national est loin d'avoir la majorité absolue.
Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the firebrand leader of the New Popular Front, told supporters they'd denied the national rally the majority so many pundits had predicted, and called that an immense relief. At the headquarters of the national rally, it was a much different mood.
Malheureusement, l'alliance du déshonneur.
Jordan Bardella of the National Rally told supporters they were the victims of an alliance of dishonor between the far left and the centrist bloc of French President Emmanuel Macron. In the lead up to this vote, centrist and leftist parties had strategically pulled candidates in some constituencies and urged their supporters to vote tactically to stop the far right. That strategy paid off, but has also left France with a hung parliament and, for the moment, an uncertain political future. Tom Perry, CBC News, London.
Voters also went to the polls in the French Pacific territory of New Caledonia, and for the first time in decades, they elected a pro-independence Indigenous Kanak candidate to France's parliament. In May, New Caledonia saw weeks of deadly riots. People were protesting a change to the constitution that would alter voting rules. Indigenous Kanaks make up about 40% of the territory. They feared the change would dilute their influence. Questions continue about Joe Biden's future as a U.S. presidential candidate. This weekend, Democrats met to discuss Biden's next move following his poor debate performance. There are growing calls for the president to reconsider his run against Donald Trump. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, this is a big week for Biden as all eyes are on him. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it sure is. This could very well be a defining week for his presidency. Congress is now back in session for the first time since that consequential debate, and elected Democrats will discuss in person whether they want to keep or drop him from the top of the ticket. Now, so far, at least 5 elected Democrats, most from vulnerable swing districts, have publicly called on him to step aside after his disastrous debate performance that raised questions about his mental fitness and vitality for the job. Now, over the weekend, top Democrats had a conference call where more lawmakers calling for Biden to leave was more than the number who spoke up for him to stay, according to multiple reports. But Biden is digging in, insisting he's staying in the race, telling ABC News he'll give it his all to defeat Donald Trump in November. But take a listen to California Congressman Adam Schiff on the state of his party's leadership.
This is not just about whether he gave it the best college try, but rather whether he made the right decision to run or to pass the torch.
Now, Democrats pushing for Biden's ouster are calling for Vice President Kamala Harris to take the helm, but Biden's campaign says this revolt is being orchestrated by Washington elites and isn't resonating among the party's base.
Now, Biden is hosting allies at a critical moment in his presidency and candidacy. What are we expecting during this week's NATO summit?
Yeah, well, Biden is hosting the world stage on his home turf, and his agenda shows he's going to be meeting with NATO members and hosting an unscripted press conference towards the end of the week. So he'll be under tremendous scrutiny for any stumble, any flub that could fuel more pressure from within for him to step aside.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. And that is the latest news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence. I'm sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And good morning as well to the folks watching on YouTube. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. May McKillop is our director. Tech producer Abby Adiemi, and of course Heather Wells on your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Finding a job isn't easy. Last week we heard from a Winnipeg teen who, despite their best efforts, can't seem to land a job. We're going to hear from a Winnipegger in their mid-20s this half hour who says despite the opportunities out there, it feels like no one wants to take on 20-somethings. That's coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and on YouTube. Stay tuned. We're at 11 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Heather Wells joining us now from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre is about to become the second hospital in Canada to use artificial intelligence to detect weapons. Shared Health says it will test out the new AI detectors at the entrance to the HSC Emergency Department and the Crisis Response Centre. Analysts, though, say this technology isn't sophisticated enough to detect all weapons. And bonding through basketball in River Osborne, dozens of young players came out to the opening of the upgraded courts at the Mayfair Rec Centre yesterday. We'll take you there in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. So far, no major closures or delays in your morning commute, but if you see something that is bothering you, call our commuter line 204-788-3093. May McKillop is waiting for your phone call, 204-788-3093. Abby Ediemi is following the forecast, and it is going to be hot today.
Yes, we are warming up, my friend. We are now at 20 in the city. We're seeing that sunrise outside. Be advised, it's going to be a humid day. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today. There's a good chance of showers sometime in the afternoon. A risk of thunderstorm to go with that. Some hazy conditions expected also. And we will warm up to 27, but it's going to feel hotter than that. It might be in the range of the 30s, so be prepared with that humidity. Now, tonight will be partly cloudy also. A good chance of showers early in the evening. A risk of thunderstorm. The hazy conditions will continue. Then we will cool down to 15. And just a sneak peek into tomorrow morning, expect some sunny conditions to start the day, and then a transition to a mix of sun and clouds. Other regions in the province, 18 at the moment in Thompson. Churchill is at 13. Brandon at 18, Dauphin 18. Most part of the southern part of the province hovering between 18 and 17 from Gimli all the way down to Morris.
Coming up to 14 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Well, it seems nobody wants to hire young people anymore. It is how it feels for some. Stats Canada says the last time the youth unemployment rate was this high was back in 2016. Information Radio is taking a closer look at why. Last week, the president of BGC Canada, formerly the Boys and Girls Club, spoke on the program. Owen Chatter says youth unemployment has two different camps, the teens and the 20-somethings.
High unemployment, I think it's really driven by young people in that later part of that age category, so closer to the 24-year mark, who are coming out of school looking for jobs and not finding the jobs that they were promised, that they thought they'd get with the education they were getting. We see a cohort that's being told, hey, the world is your oyster, you should be doing all these great things, and the jobs aren't available because we are now starting to tell people, oh, you need 5 years of experience, you need these certain skill sets, or you're moving into an industry where we just don't have the jobs for you, unfortunately.
Now, 24-year-old Viley falls into that cohort of older young people struggling to find a job right now. They join us in studio. Good morning. Welcome.
Hi, good morning.
You were listening to Owen Chatters there, and I noticed you were nodding your head. And what did you think as you heard those numbers?
So, yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I definitely have a lot of people in my life who are struggling to find work the same age as me. Years of experience, they've gone to school for like specific things, and there's no jobs out there, or they're finding jobs and there's no response. We're being ghosted. It's not great.
That must be frustrating.
Yeah, it is very frustrating.
What field of work are you looking for?
So I am special, I guess, because I have a background in like more artistic stuff. So I went to school for like special effects makeup and like hairstyling and stuff. So yeah, that's a very hard field of work also to find work in. There's barely anything out there that I can, find that I want to do.
But it's a field that you decided to get into.
Yes.
When you first got into it, what made you decide, okay, this is something I want to do. This is something that I'm passionate about. I will find work. How did you get into it?
I think I don't know. I don't think I wanted to follow the traditional role of just, working retail or working, just like a cashier job for my whole life. I think that's just not something I ever really wanted to do. And I just, I wanted to do something that I love and that I find fulfilling. So yeah, I think that was my goal.
It's your calling.
Yeah, exactly.
Take us through your job hunt. What has it been like so far for you?
So I've had quite a few jobs in my past. Most of them have been, unfortunately, retail and, just like kind of just jobs that haven't been, I don't know, haven't been what I wanted to do. But actually I have worked with IATSE in Winnipeg. So that was awesome. I did something that I really love to do. And I definitely want to go back to that
for people who
again.
don't know, that's the union representing film workers.
Yes, it's really cool. I did costuming. So yeah, I just got to like be creative and, do things that I liked, and it was really, really cool. I definitely want to get back into that again.
What about your friends and the people who are sort of within your your sphere, your community? What are you hearing about what they're encountering when it comes to looking for work?
So yeah, I've had quite a few people tell me that they're applying for 80, hundreds of jobs. And
it's kind of unbelievable when you think of it, huh?
It is wild, yeah, and like the same here. And they haven't gotten anything back. Like they get no response, or they'll get like an interview and it just doesn't turn out. And yeah, it's mostly just like no response from employers, which is very strange.
Do you have a sense of why that might be? Why they're not getting responses? Why they're being, as you described it, ghosted?
I would say, I don't know. I think a lot of employers nowadays want like that, like multiple years of experience, which obviously we don't have. We're just coming out of school, like previously said.
And that's what you're trying to essentially do, is gain
exactly.
that experience.
We're trying to get that experience. So yeah, it's very strange.
Last week we talked about artificial intelligence, essentially filtering out potentially worthy resumes. Is that something that you've heard from the folks around you and in your experience as well?
Yeah, not a whole lot, but I have heard that's been an issue. I've also heard of like fake job postings and scam job postings, which is also a huge issue, I think, with us as well right now. Yeah.
I know that you also identify as being disabled and non-binary. When you think of your unique lived experience, how much do you think your social identity also impacts your ability to find a job?
So I think that it's definitely way more difficult to find a job when you're disabled, just because of you don't want stigma in the workplace.
Right. There's
a lot of employers that don't have the accessibility that you need to work, or they just they don't really even think about it is a big issue. I know like a lot of places like I've heard like Walmart and stuff, like you're not even allowed to sit down when you're working. Like that's pretty crazy, like especially if you have disability issues.
And it might not encourage folks who would need accommodations to apply in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
I asked if this was frustrating emotionally. How would you characterize how it's been for you?
Yeah, just very tough. I mean, like I'm renting a house with roommates right now, and it's I need money to be able to survive and to pay rent and to just get around and things like that, and that puts a lot of pressure on me for sure.
Is it clear to you what you think needs to change so that the situation is different, or it even might make it easier for young people to find work?
That's kind of difficult to say, really,
That's a big question.
But yeah, I think just I don't know. I'm with the Youth Employment Services right now, which has been an insane amount of help. They've been lovely, and
how have they been helpful?
Oh, they've been great. They provide interview clothes, which is a big thing I've heard, especially for people that are low income or homeless. That's a huge help. They've been helping with resume building, cover letter building, and just like making people more confident in being able to work and like helping stress management and stuff like that, which is a huge thing for me too.
There's a lot of things involved in getting jobs and even in the first part of getting the job, which is the interview process, right? What are you hoping for? I mean, we're talking about this and the challenges that you're seeing and folks around you are seeing. What are you hoping for?
I think I'm just hoping for employers to be more accommodating. I think is the biggest thing. I think we just need, better resources. I think I would love it if the government funded these programs more. I think that's a huge thing. And yeah, just better accessibility in general for people who need it. Yeah.
Thank you for making time to talk about your experiences, and it's very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Viley is a young Winnipegger on the job hunt. This conversation is all part of a continuing series we are doing right now about youth unemployment. Let us know what it was like for you when you were searching for a job. Perhaps you are in the same camp as Vi, in your 20-somethings and having a hard time finding work. Call our listener line 204-788-3205, 204-788-3205.
There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Liftoff.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
In 2007, TV network CBS dropped 40 kids in the middle of the New Mexico desert as part of a brand new reality show. And if this sounds like Lord of the Flies to you, it was meant to.
We were going to prove to the world that we could make a better society than adults could.
I'm Josh Gwynn, and I want to know what this wild TV experiment was really about. Split Screen, Kid Nation, a 6-part podcast from CBC, available now.
Coming up to 23 minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and of course on streaming on YouTube. Hello, if you are watching today, Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. It is not unusual for teens to play soccer, but a group from Papas Chase First Nation in Alberta is doing it in a whole new way. They are playing drone soccer. Yes, it's a thing. The CBC's Tristan Mottershed stopped into the arena to find out more.
I'm Brandon.
My name's Jaden.
I'm Angel.
So when you guys were first introduced to the idea, were you all over it? Was this something that piqued your interest right away?
Yeah, for me it was really interesting since I'm kind of like a tech guy. So I came across it as like a fun idea. And especially with these two, I thought it would be fun.
Could you kind of describe the setup that you have going on behind you guys?
So it's an inflatable, arena, I guess.
It's about, I'd say, 10 feet by 20 feet. It's got 2 giant rings in it. And so this is all meant for a game. Let's get started with this. Let's set up the drones and get them in the arena, and then let's see this in action.
There's 3 people on each team. 2 goalies, I'm pretty sure, on each side, and then 1 ball, or 1, let's say outfield. So the outfield's goal is to get through the nets without being knocked over by the goalies and to get as many points as possible. And after 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whoever has the most points wins.
The kind of drones that you guys are using over here aren't like your typical drones. They've got a bit of a cage around them.
It's made for like crashing into each other, so the drones don't get like kind of injured and like broken and stuff.
I think they're based off of like what the game's called, drone soccer.
So how difficult is it to maintain and keep these drones up to date and in shape?
If the drones inside the actual cage break, trying to fix them is definitely the hardest. Cages are easy, propellers are easy, but if it's the black parts, then it's like really hard.
So do you ever run into issues during the game where drones break and you have to fix things on the fly? What would happen during an actual game to solve that issue?
If it was the outer white part, we would stop the game, and then I would take the drone and replace it with a different one. And I would take the white parts off and put new ones on, because when you buy them, they come with a bunch of new ones. And then we'd let the game continue.
How difficult was it to learn how to fly these and actually start kind of participating in this?
I mean, honestly, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you're really kind of used to drones and stuff, it's definitely going to be easy for you. It took me probably a day just to get used to this.
Normally I don't fly them because I'm not the best at it. They definitely are. But I think it took me at least 2 weeks to actually figure out how to fly it properly. Now it's whatever, it's easy.
When I was younger, I used to ask for a lot of drones and stuff, so not really that long for me, but yeah, took me probably 5 minutes.
Is this something that you'd hope to continue doing over the next couple of years?
Oh, definitely. I'm hoping I could take this, I don't know, as far as possible until they stop me.
That was the CBC's Tristan Mottershed talking with folks playing soccer using drones. It's drone soccer. So fascinating. Janet Stewart, have you ever heard of drone soccer?
Only here on Information Radio with you, Faith Fundal.
It's so fun. So fun. You have a pretty serious conversation happening on Radio Noon today.
And doesn't it dovetail beautifully with your interview that you just had with Vi and this series we're doing with Information Radio about why youth are struggling to find jobs? Our guest today in our calling conversation, which is the second half of Radio Noon, is our guest is Joyce Odidison. She is a workplace consultant and a conflict analyst. She's been hearing from a lot of employers that there's a disconnect, that younger employees come in and they may be different skilled. They don't have the skills that employers are looking for, and sometimes those are soft skills, communication skills. Right. Joyce is working on a training program to help parents help their kids. So I'd love to hear from you today. What do you think about this? If you're a young person who, like Vi, is looking for work, I mean, what do you feel when you hear employers saying that younger people don't have the skills they need? Does that bother you? Do you think that maybe employers need to step up a bit more, that there needs to be a meet in the middle kind of thing? You can leave a message for us right now at 204-788-3797, or you can call live during Radio Noon today. The live calling conversation starts at 12:35 today.
Going to be a good conversation.
It will be.
And impacting a lot of folks too. So
absolutely.
Looking forward to hearing from the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith.
It's Janet Stewart, host of Radio Noon, starting at, of course, noon today. And of course, the call-in segment starts at 12:30. We're just about 29 minutes after 8 o'clock here on 8:30 here. What am I talking about here? Almost 8:29 here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Coming up later this morning, if you subscribe to OnlyFans, you can buy sexually explicit content from your favorite porn star. Celebrities now using the platform to sell exclusive photos and videos, but a lot of artists are using it to make ends meet, which raises all sorts of questions about the viability of being an artist these days and what it means for sex workers when other people jump on board. You can hear that conversation on Commotion here on CBC Radio 1 at 11 o'clock. On CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll also hear more from The Current coming up in just a few moments' time, so stay tuned for that. We'll get a full look at your weather forecast here on the program. Stay tuned as well for that. If you see any issues during your morning commute, we still have a bit of time to let the folks out there know. Call our commuter line, 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. May McKillop, our studio director, is waiting for your phone call. If you've missed it, Vaughan Avenue is closed between Graham and the Promenade for the next couple of days, and Kennedy as well Street is closed at Portage until the 10th of July, again in a couple of days for the next couple of days. Stay tuned. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. We're at 19. We're headed to 27 today. It's going to feel warmer than that. Humidex of 30. It's going to be a little muggy out there today under a mix of sun and clouds with a chance of late day showers. A group of parents at St. John's Ravens Court worries about the school's response to the Israel-Hamas war. They describe instances of bullying against students who went to the private school wearing a keffiyeh. The checkered black and white scarf has long been worn by Palestinians and is often seen at pro-Palestinian protests. The parents, whose identities we are keeping confidential, say the school allowed students to wear keffiyehs. A University of Manitoba professor of peace and conflict studies says that is a sign the school is demonstrating respect. But Adam Muller says discussing the significance of the scarf would also be helpful.
Notwithstanding the fact that these symbols are loaded, particularly now, schools can still use that loading to sort of further the discussion of what it means to be tolerant, right? And how we need to be pluralistic in our acceptance of the differences that genuinely divide us without fracturing the community.
St. John's Ravens Court won't comment on specific concerns. The school says it strives to be a welcoming place for students of all backgrounds. Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre will soon be able to detect weapons using artificial intelligence. Shared Health says it will test out the new AI detectors at the entrance to HSC's emergency department and the crisis response centre. They will scan and send an alert to security if something like a knife or a gun is detected. Dr. Sean Young is the Chief Operating Officer at HSC.
If you're using metal detector technology, it means you have to pause, you need to take all the metal out, you could cause a backlog and a wait as well, whereas this technology is much more seamless. You just walk through as if you're just walking through a doorway. It's just a much more seamless way to be able to ensure safety than traditional methods.
Analysts say the technology isn't sophisticated enough to detect all weapons, but Young says it's just one of many measures the hospital is using to improve security. Health Sciences Centre would become the second hospital in Canada to use this technology. International news now, and at least 20 people in Ukraine are dead. Dozens more are injured after a wave of Russian missiles hit cities across the country. In Kyiv, a crowd of people rushing to a children's hospital that was hit by a rocket. They're trying to clear away debris at the site. Residential buildings and electricity substations in the capital were also damaged. Here's Kyiv's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko.
Having right now the people from rubble of the buildings. One more tragedy for our hometown.
The huge missile attack also hit cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 40 rockets were fired. Ukraine's defense minister is calling on allies to provide more air defenses. Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrives in Washington today to join his fellow NATO leaders, marking the alliance's 75th anniversary. The leaders' summit formally begins tomorrow and will focus primarily on the war in Ukraine. Defense Minister Bill Blair and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly will both join Trudeau at the summit table. Canada is also expected to face pressure from the alliance to increase its military spending to meet the minimum NATO requirement. Well, celebrating some new courts in River Osborne. Brett Del Monte Loban was among dozens of young hoopers at the stylish new Mayfair Recreation Center courts yesterday.
It's been awesome. A few of my friends are here. Some of the Seabears players are here. Just great people.
There were games, competition, and a skills camp for the youngsters. The project was an undertaking between nonprofit Buckets and Borders and the Winnipeg Seabears. One court was refurbished. The other court is brand new. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather Wells, I can't let you go without talking about basketball. You actually know how to play basketball? Not actually. I say actually because I don't know how to play basketball.
I'm not very good, but I had brothers who were so good. And as you know, I grew up on a cattle ranch, and so we had a barnyard hoop, barnyard basketball.
That. And what was it that you had to try to not dribble into?
Yeah, strategically dribbling to avoid any kind of cow pies, to put it nicely, manure.
It would be challenging, be very sticky.
But it builds your skills.
That's true. It's very nice working with you today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks very much. Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Abby Adiemi has been following the weather. I guess first I should talk about the commute, although there's nothing to talk about. So, yay, Monday morning commute for the summer.
I guess it's the commute. You just have to crank up your air conditioning system, or better still, you just roll down and just let some natural... You might not want to do that because it's humid outside. You're letting the odd air in, so I don't really know you want to get that down. No, I don't think you should do that. It's going to be humid, actually. The city will be seeing 27. We're currently we're getting to a high of 27 with a mix of sun and clouds. Potential afternoon or an evening showers will definitely come with thunderstorm, and hazy conditions will stay with us. Up north, Thompson and Churchill expecting mainly sunny skies with hazy conditions, also chance of showers and thunderstorm, and we'll see highs of 28 for Thompson and 18 for Churchill. For the southern part of the province, Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, and Maurice all will be seeing highs around 27. It's going to be sunny. We're going to see a mix of sun and clouds and possible showers and thunderstorm and haze and humid. And it will be hot. And hydrate.
Yeah, it's important. Thank you, Abby Ediemi. Our technical producer, May McKillop, is on the controls today. Brad Lilly is our streaming producer. Goodbye, folks who were watching on our YouTube stream. I'm Faith Fundal. Don't forget, Radio Noon is up at 12 o'clock with our call-in portion at 12:30 this afternoon with Janet Stewart. And this afternoon, Chloe Friesen will be hosting Up to Speed. Mag-ingat po kayo and take good care wherever you are. Thanks for listening. I'm Faith Fundal. The Current is coming up next.